So it's Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020. I am Steven Sersky. This is episode number 11 of the Steven Sersky podcast. And today, as you can see, I am heading out. This is, I'm actually packed. You can see the microphone stand in my backpack. And that's because I'm heading off location to see and visit Steve Blaque, who is a former colleague and a good friend here in Beijing, China, who is, after 20 years of being in China, leaving, finally, and heading back to Australia, to Tasmania, where he is setting up his own studio to basically live the life of a singer-songwriter and a music producer. So today's conversation will be a little bit more probably open-ended, and then of course probably a bit longer, I imagine, as well. Hope you enjoy it.
Let's, on the basis of this, tell me, what are you doing? It's great, it's fantastic. You're setting up a podcast and you're going to stream it to the world. And
well, sadly I'm not streaming because I
I don't mean streaming to the world as in streaming.
It's up there. This is number 11. This is episode number 11 already.
Right.
And this
regularly, or
I try. I didn't realize it was going to be such a time requirement. It's about 5 hours of prep for every episode.
Right.
And not just prep, but then doing all the editing and stuff like that. I didn't realize that it was going to take so long. But one of the ideas was to learn how Logic works. I wanted to get involved with more audio post-production. And there's like, maybe you can sympathize with this. You have all these projects that you did before. You have all these ideas. You're like, oh, I'm going to get to it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to get to it. Yeah, I will eventually. But then you never do, because there's always something that you had to learn in order to get those projects finished.
Yep.
But every time you go back to that, it reminds you of how much stuff you haven't done. So the idea with this was to make something new that I had to publish, and that I could make good enough to publish now and not spend forever editing. Like we were talking about my albums last year, right? And you walked me through it, and that was sort of the first time I sat down and watched someone work through using an audio workstation like that. I'm going, I didn't know what a sidechain was back then. Still now I'm like, oh, that's what a sidechain is. It's just an auxiliary strip that you put some effects on that you have to remember to turn on your board. You have to remember to put the send up. You have to turn up the send so it goes to the auxiliary. And then you can apply a certain effect or a certain set of effects to whatever's being sent to that auxiliary. Mm-hmm. Brilliant!
You think about what you're doing now in terms of a podcast. As you know, like the number of times you would have listened to that I've listened to. For example, a poetry reading, but with music.
Mm-hmm.
And every now and again, the music, you would go, it's perceptibly louder. And you're aware of it, but then seamlessly, the music ducks beneath, but doesn't disappear, ducks beneath the utterances that come out from the reader, from the narrator. Seamlessly. Just so smoothly that there's no imperceptible are the volume changes. And that's side chaining with compression.
Right.
So as soon as that voice starts, bang, the music ducks. And in fact, they even sell VSTs called duckers, which is nothing more than
that's what it does. Okay, so that's what a ducker is. Okay.
That's what a ducker is.
Yeah. Well, and
what the fuck is a ducker?
And I was looking through all of these effects.
Your mother ducker.
Because when you were showing me this, you were talking about all these plugins and stuff like that. I'm going, okay, well, first of all, I don't want to spend like another $1,000 on equipment that I'm only going to use once. That was the big thing.
Sure.
And then I was also talking to, was it Neil? Wave. He uses Waves as well. Neil.
Right. Swayze, right?
Yeah. And so I was talking to him, and he's like, yeah, just use these wave plugins and stuff like that. I'm like, more buying stuff. Can I not just use Logic? And I did. There's another guy who also agreed to be on my podcast, maybe next week or the week after. And I asked him, like, can you edit audio without using plugins? And he goes, with Logic. And he's like, yes, Logic is a solid program. You can do it.
Yeah.
And not only that, but it was, I was reading online, and this is more me just trying to avoid overcomplicating everything, especially with those two albums that we were listening to, the djembe one and the rock band one, or the garage band, whatever. But I wanted that raw, organic sound as close to how it was being recorded as possible.
Totally.
And I didn't want extra stuff on it just yet. But that being the case with the podcast, I mean, I'm playing around with the effects, even just minimizing room sound.
Yep.
Like is a different artistic way of dealing with the frequencies.
And all the plugins that you want to be able to do that, to produce a podcast, are all there inside Logic. Everything is there.
I tried a few of them though, and I don't know, maybe it's my voice, maybe it's worse than I think it is. I thought I had a nice voice, but I'm listening back to it and I'm going,
I think that's always a natural kind of phenomenon, that a person maybe doesn't like the sound of their own voice.
I sound nasally.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to it going, this doesn't make, like, I'm not a nasally person. I don't think I am, but the other thing was like mic technique. I listened back to the first one. I had the microphone right up to my mouth because I thought that's what you had to do.
Right.
But then I'm like, no, you got to push it back about a fist, maybe 2 fists.
Sure.
And you turn up the volume on the microphone, and then from there, that also reduces like your swallowing and your mouth clicks and stuff like that,
things, yeah.
which is stuff that I have never dealt with before. And apparently, if you add certain plugins like a compressor to it, that actually makes it worse.
It does, but then again, you've also got software that comes out from, say, Isotope, but Isotope not exclusively. There are other companies as well that will do things like they'll have noise emissions and stuff like that. Breaths, for example, you can remove the breaths simply by going through, looking at and attenuating a threshold. So you can actually take out a lot of that incidental noise. A lot of times I'm looking at tutorials on YouTube, podcasts effectively, where people have put up. And I live by those. I mean, I need those tutorials, and I'm watching them every goddamn day and night. You know, like you go to sleep looking at one, you wake up, that's the first thing you do. And you get to be very critical of guys that are putting this stuff out, and you get to hear the underbelly of their voices, the swallows, the stammers, the glottals, the sputum inside. You know, you think, God, can't you remove that? And the fact of the matter is, you can, but you know,
but you have to do it.
But you have to do it,
which is another problem. Is that you have to sit down and actually do it.
Well, you know, like this morning, last night I was working on a project, a song on in Logic. Ableton had crashed 3 or 4 times, resulting in my here's the crash dialogue. You know, come on now. Are we recording right now?
Yeah, we got everything going.
Oh, so we're going. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. So
if you don't mind, or
no, that's fine. That's fantastic.
Restart again.
So here's the crash dialogue that goes out, and you know I've got to copy that in and put it into a letter that's apparently a non-reply letter that goes out to them. But for the heck of it, I'm there punching, not typing. I'm punching. And furthermore, it's the last time I'm going to have to use. What a pity that it's come to this. 16 years down the drain of using Ableton, and I can continue to use this software no longer because it's crashing all the time. God damn you guys! You know, blah 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 blah. Send the letter off. Ableton's crashed. Open up Logic, and it's time to work in Logic. By virtue of the fact that I was wanting to do this piece, but of course I could only do it in Logic because of Logic's fantastic drummer. The drummer plugin, the different drummers that you have in Logic, like there's I forget their names right now, but
like
there's
SoCal or the Kenny and
then there's probably Barbie, and I don't know. There's no Barbie, but there's a couple of girls in there. Those drummers are insane. And more recently, I was reading about how to use those drummers in odd timings. So, for example, 7/8, 6/8, all this kind of stuff. And that was opening up for me. That was what I really wanted with Logic, is I needed to have this drummer. Now, there's actually a third-party bassist as well, so that, for example, you could have, what's the word I want? An AI drummer, which Logic is providing. There's also an AI bassist as well, which Easy Drummer? Easy Drummer, but Tune Tracks.
Right.
Tune Tracks now supply their bassist as well. Now I'm getting very close to the point I've been holding up, because you know, for people listening to this podcast, because now that I know that we're recording, people are listening to this, and you know we're in China right now. Is that okay to mention that? We're in China right now, and there's a lot of people here that are kind of trapped here. they're not earning any money, so they're on tight budgets, and I'm one of those as well, where all the things that I want and all the things that I took for granted in the past, every week would go past, and I'd be buying another VST and buying this and buying that, because it didn't mean, it mattered for shit, because they were sort of relatively cheap. Well, there's an AI bassist from Toontracks that I simply cannot wait to actually explore, but I've just got to wait, because I can't, until I know what my final fly date is and what my budget is. The day I know is the day that I invest in the package, because what it'll allow me to do is to intuitively write pieces of music with 100% total feel. Now you can do that. Obviously I can do that with the keyboard, but I'm not a keyboardist, a pianist as such. Yes, I can play keyboards and do all that kind of stuff, and I can play a bass guitar on a keyboard, but it's never the same. You can get a wonderful sounding patch to do all that, but it's never the same. It doesn't have the same nuance. And what this software does is it offers you the nuance of a bass player, and Logic's Drummer gives you the nuance of a drummer. And you can do it by a wonderful little technique that I worked on. It's so simple. It's like all you have to do is to check a little box where you tell the drummer to follow the track.
Yes.
Which track? The bass track or the keyboard track or whatever you want. Man.
it literally, when I first saw that happen, the first thought I had was when I used to play in a Ukrainian polka band in Canada, and they used to tease me that, we can replace the drummer. I'm like, yeah, I guess that's true. You could have, because especially with a polka beat, it's not very difficult.
Yeah.
But now looking at it, going, it's not just the drummer you can replace. You can replace everyone.
You can replace
all of them. You don't need to work with anyone. You come up with an idea, and you punch it in. You don't even have to. I mean, you don't have to do it well. You punch in a couple keys. You use MIDI, and then all of a sudden it sounds like the instrument you want. And then you match that with your bass player, and then you have the drummer play along with that bass player, and now you've got your melody, your bass, and your drums all going. Extend for 3 minutes, and there's your
that's
foundation track.
And there's some support software for that as well. I just can't think of the name of the software right now. It might come to me while we're talking, where you can build up the whole ensemble, the whole thing, the whole 9 yards. It's all done, effectively reaffirming what you were saying. Recently I bought software called Scalar, and this is absolutely stunning. There was Scalar 1, Scalar 2 has just come out. Scalar 2 is absolutely the bee's knees of composing. So as a composer, as you're sitting back there now, I still like to, and I covered a song called Gangsta Paradise from Coolio.
I heard that.
Yeah, well it's not, I pulled it down off my site because it wasn't quite right. It was all too raw, looking for the right voice and blah, blah, blah. Not just in the vocals, but also the guitar sounds and all that kind of stuff. And it was a rushed mix, but it was an amazing process to have to go through to get things done the right way by virtue of breaking out the drums and using drum stems, blah, blah, blah.
So that was all you, but you used different instruments, like the different digital instruments to
different
create.
Digital, yeah, sure. It was totally, the only thing that I actually composed, I remember I was talking about Scalar, I'll come back to that in just a sec, but I actually composed the intro, because there's only 4 chords in the song, but I composed this really delicate guitar piece, which I did sitting on the bed with a guitar in the morning, which is, to me, the best way to compose. Composing is still a traditional art form that I personally love doing. I think a lot of people do as well, particularly, if they're pianists or brass players or whatever, guitarists and whatever. But with Scalar, it's like you can set up some paradigms for the AI to come on in. You know what you're looking for. You know you're searching for something like, for example, you're doing something where you want certain emotions to be conveyed through the music because you're writing it because it's matching a lyric that you've written, or because maybe you're trying to put together a soundtrack, which is what I'm working on a little bit at the moment, maybe we'll talk about later, where you need to convey certain kinds of emotions. Well, Scalar allows you to go through there, to enter into that sort of room, whereby you can target chordal arrangements to match up what you're looking for in terms of the emotion, and then go beyond that in terms of the rhythm.
So it has a definition, like I want it to be sad, I want it to be happy.
It can be without meaning to, because that's exactly what it was. You want a song to be happy, you want a song to be sad, you want to write a 3 minute and 27-second pop song that's going to convey puppy love. Puppy love, bang, there it is. This is the chord progression for you as well. And each chord that they are now throwing out for you has a variation. So in the end, it's like I could be sitting there and I'm going to be working on a song where I've got my palette of, let's say I've got 12 chords, for the diatonic scale, I've got these 12 chords. Each one of those chords has multiple variations. And this is before I even enter into things like with rhythm and tempo and all those kinds of things. So I can actually go through, isolate the chords that I want. Ultimately, I can put them together and just simply, I'll press that button there, which gives me this particular chord. Now I want to move from that particular chord. I want the emotion to be despair, but come out of despair into realization that it's all going to be good again.
Right.
And I can convey that through pressing that chord, that chord, that chord, that chord, just simply by pressing a button. Or I can also press a key on the keyboard as well, on the MIDI keyboard.
Jeez.
Once it's all done, and once I've mapped out what it is that I want, I can then simply record that inside the Scalar software, and then drag and drop inside my DAW. Mm-hmm. Logic, Ableton, Cubase, whatever.
So does that use keyframes then? Like it's automation basically. That you're saying the key though.
The key.
Chord, but then like you just punch it in, like there's a little triangle dot on the sound file, right? And you punch it another one. Because I'm coming to this like as a film editor, or like even using Logic, the automation.
Right. Okay. Less so like that. That you are. Ultimately, there's things called keyframes. If we think about it from the filming side of things, right. Yeah, it's kind of like that because you're putting in a key point somewhere.
Yeah.
But actually, what you're doing is you might have a sequence of 4 bars, for example. In the end, you might just go with a 4-bar sequence that could be made up of 1 chord per bar, or it could be made up of 2 or 3 chords per bar. That 4-bar sequence, which you've already in the back end, you've gone through and you've mapped out these chords to be the most seamless, if that's what you're looking for, the most seamless transition in terms of a cadence. And when it's all there, you just simply drag it out. And as an icon, it just simply drags across. Then the MIDI chords, the lines for each MIDI note will appear as you place it in over the instrument that you're working with. It could be a piano, it could be a brass arrangement, it could be strings, it could be anything.
So do you still work with other people then? Because I know you have a drummer in Australia, I think.
Yeah, well, the drummer in Australia, and a little shout out for him because he's in Australia's big hip hop band. They've been playing for 4 decades now.
And he plays in that band, or he produced, or he plays in that band.
He does both. Hilltop Hoods.
Which is like one of the CDs I bought when I was in Australia.
Well, there you do. Yeah. There you go. That's you think about it. To stay for 4 decades in the industry. Now he's been with them since 2010, I believe.
Right.
So coming into the 2nd decade, that means for a bunch of young kids to start a band in 1992 or something like that, and in hip hop, not like rock and roll, not like the Dinosaurs, like the Rolling Stones and Aerosmith and all that kind of stuff. This is hip hop, where people thought it was here today, gone tomorrow, when in fact it's here today and stayed forever.
It's still there. But the Hilltop Hoods, they've changed sounds over time.
Yeah, they've evolved. They've evolved. Like a lot of hip hop artists, and that's something that I both enjoy and because I was doing gangster rap, and if you've already heard it, you know that you already have a sense that. And I was talking to Lee, the drummer. So that's the guy from Hilltop Hoods. He's Lee, and he and I back and forth. He has a studio in Melbourne, and I would sometimes do my drums would be assembled down in Melbourne. We would either do it by my virtually being in his studio, so I'd have to be there, or now we do a lot of stuff. We do it on remote control, not remote control, but what's the word I want? Remote recording.
Right.
So we could use any kind of software for that, but we're using Cubase because it's actually all it's entwined inside Cubase. There's a software package that comes within it, blah, blah, blah. And you don't have to use Zoom or anything like that. But with a lot of the other software, I think you've still got to use, I know with Logic, with Ableton, Studio Live, you still have to use other third parties, but with Cubase it stays totally within that thing. There you are, you're printing, you've got someone in another room, in another country, another city or whatever, and you're printing their performance onto your door, on your computer.
Oh, so it's showing up like real time?
It's showing up in real time.
Okay.
It's coming up in real time, but the beauty of this is the file that's coming up in real time is the low-grade file. If the take is what you want, you simply go click, hit a button, and the real files download from the external computer in the other city, country, wherever.
So how long does that take? Because I imagine that depends on your internet connection, which here in China can be kind of dicey.
Yeah, well, we're behind the Great Wall of China, as we all know. No perceptible hindrance.
No?
So if I was after a 3-minute drum track,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we're working on, it would take the setup time to make sure that everything is working, and then the drum track, which is going to take 3 minutes, would take 3 minutes, and then we'd do the downloads. The downloads could take anywhere from, if you're thinking about it in terms of multiple microphones, and so it's drums, it could be 5 or 6 tracks at one time. That could take 30 minutes, 40 minutes for one song.
How big are the files, like from one microphone?
Well, one microphone coming into one track at around about 3 minutes would probably come out around about 40 megabytes.
40 megs, okay.
Yeah, 40 megs.
So that's still kind of small, because I think about video, if I have to upload anything to YouTube, I dread it.
Oh yeah. Well, you could be uploading, if you're doing good quality, you're going to be uploading gigabytes.
Gigs, and you're sitting there going, okay, did I remember to click upload before I left the house today?
with that exactly, with that kind of stuff, what I tend to work on is my routines for temper tantrum. It's my temper tantrum pantomimes, and the sounds that I can come with. You got the you have your breakdown. If you haven't got those sounds happening, I'm sorry, but if people don't work in studios, they're listening to this, they've never been in a studio, they've never worked with a computer, where you're facing a computer with a door or with a film editing suite. The unmistakable sounds of a breakdown. My neighbours upstairs, they get. I feel for these guys. They've heard everything over this period of COVID, because they hear my rehearsals when I'm rehearsing my live show, and they hear the breakdowns. And obviously they're hearing me singing and going. And some of those vocal takes that I'm doing are absolutely atrocious, because I'm working on a part. I'm trying to get the part together.
And they're thinking, I hope he doesn't do this professionally.
Oh, that's.
Ugh, cat scratching on a green board, blackboard. Oh,
actually, there's a beautiful little corollary to that story, because the guy upstairs, who's a bit older than me, speaks pretty damn fine English, very fine English, and probably better than me to some extent. And we caught up the other day recently downstairs as he was throwing his rubbish out, and I was down coming back from doing whatever I was doing. We stopped and we talked and blah blah blah. And once again, as I do every time I sort of see him, I always apologise and say, look, if the noise is ever too great, just simply come on down, knock on a door, and I'll stop, because I don't want to cause any problems there and all that kind of stuff. And he keeps on telling me, no, we love it. My wife and I, we love your sort of 4 o'clock show or 5 o'clock shows. If I'm streaming a show live, it's usually about 5 o'clock.
In the morning or?
No, in the
afternoon. Really understanding it 4 o'clock in the morning.
really feeling it, boy. But we talked at length, and he said, where can I hear your music? We know you do it, but where can I hear it? And I said, well, look, okay, I've got a few different sites, and we connected on WeChat, which is what people use in China, and I exchanged a few of the websites, and anyway, he went in and he listened to the music, he was getting right off on it. So, and I was in the middle, later that night, I'm doing some stuff in the studio, in the room next to where you and I are talking right now, and there's some messages coming in from him. He said, oh man, I love these songs you've done by a band called Led Zeppelin. So this guy's like in his 60s, and he's never heard of this band before, and I've done a few of their covers.
Oh,
and he's just
wow.
he's going right off on it, so I thought, fantastic. I've actually invited, just before I leave, and I do a one final rehearsal or whatever I'm going to do in terms of however I do my rehearsing. I just thought I'd invite them down, just go upstairs, knock on the door. So listen, come on, you guys, you've listened to me for 2.5 years, all this time. You know, you're very welcome. Come on down, and I'll play a few songs. So, which would be a nice gesture. He's a really nice guy.
Yeah.
So, I'm not sure what the point that started all this out was, but we wound up here. But
doing recording, and
remote recording.
Yeah.
And you asked me, actually, going back to that question, you asked me, do I still
work with people,
work with
actual people, not just like fake people.
Yeah, well, you know, this hasn't been being in China for a long time, I was very much connected to the band that I used to play with back in Australia, and I found it very difficult to get with a bunch of guys who were of a mindset that allowed me to fit comfortably in the style of music that was being played. Either I felt this thing, and it happens with music, either I felt that my own ability was a little bit too high, so that was making it very frustrating for me to have to deal with people who couldn't match where I was.
Mm-hmm.
Or in some cases, but not that often, and perhaps really only one time where I was playing with a couple of guys, two Russian dudes, a drummer and a guitarist, and they were in China for, I don't know what they were doing, they were here, I think their wives were working as teachers or whatever, and they were the musicians, just hanging along, sort of tagging along. And goes back to about 2012, 2013. These guys were really, really good. And
it's intimidating.
Yeah, well, it was to a degree before I realised I was actually holding my own by virtue of it was me that was putting all the ideas forward and making the direction. But they were better musicians than me. But I realised why that wouldn't last was the language issues. And that's the second factor. It's been very difficult to work with people over here because of language issues. If these guys are, say, Chinese, for example, or if they come from other countries that don't speak English.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is that, as I said, to start out with, the sort of approach to music and the style of music that people would want to play, that I would want to play. I've always found that very difficult to sort of be with guys, because I got spoiled playing with the guys that I was playing with in the band back in Australia a long time ago. And I've struggled since those days to actually want to be and play with other people.
I sympathize because especially finding like these drummers, this automated drumming and this automated, the thing I've been playing around with was the iPad and GarageBand and the autoplay function, because my big thing is like I have these drone videos that I refuse to pay for royalty-free music. I'm like, I can make this shit. I know I can. Yeah. You press play and it does scales for you, and it does this little solos, and it can be simple, it can be complex. I'm sitting there going, why would I work with, I mean, it's going to sound bad, why would I work with other people if I don't have to? And it's not that, I guess where you do need to work with people is where you run up to a wall of, you don't know how to make this sound just that much better. It's the same as like, nowadays, I've started using Canva for image manipulation.
Mm-hmm. And it looks not familiar with it.
Right. Like, you can make a decent looking graphic, right? And I can look at it and go, that looks good. But then you get someone who does it as a living and you go, oh no, that's good. Right. So it's the same with musician. You can sit there on an iPad and go, yeah, that's listenable. I could do that. But then you have someone who like lives this. And that's where you hear that difference of professionalism, of that melody.
Totally.
And the musicality, where you're sitting going, no, I can't do that.
That's where I've had to publicly, because I keep on putting stuff online, and I make these releases, and as we're talking today, it's the 23rd of June, I think on the I think today's Tuesday, is that right?
It's Tuesday.
Okay, so 23, 24 is Wednesday. I think on the 26th of June I've got another album coming out, which is a
You
fourth.
think you don't know this?
Well,
it's not like a massive international release?
it's a massive international release. It is coming out. It's just going to be whether it'll be the 26th or whether it'll be the following Monday or whatever. And so again, I'm doing this kind of like airing of my inner consciousness, my psyche, my emotion, the whole thing that I'm putting out for the so-called world to listen to. And whenever I do that, I'm putting myself on the line by virtue of, oh, that's what that guy's ability is. Now, people would assess that as being, wow, he's really good, or he's not very good. and he's somewhere in between.
Yeah.
And I got to suck that up. I had to suck that up. And this gets back to this idea that I've had to sort of publicly air my own, in this period of time in China, my own musical development, because I gave music away when the band sort of split up, and by the time I got to China, all I was just working as Joe Blow, a language teacher, and make no bones about that.
Right.
A lot of people come to China, work as language teachers.
I think that's how we all came here.
I think that's probably why, because we're all on the road searching for something. And in my case, I know that I was searching for something to run away from music, and there was a busted relationship, blah, blah, blah. So there's all the, the necessary background to expel me out of the country I came from, to push me somewhere else, and give music away to a degree. But I was never, Keith Starr, the number one musician in the country I came from. I was just another guy struggling, so to speak. But then, as time went by, as you kind of know anyway, the backstory, I just decided to become more and more and more involved in what I was doing. And this gets back to your point about doing it all by yourself, and then actually confronting somebody who's really doing it as a profession, and you can see the disparate levels, you can see the disparity.
And that's not a bad thing, though. I'm not saying that you're saying, oh, he's so much better. It's that you can work together, where you're like, I need a drummer who can lay down something more than what I can lay down using the iPad automatic drumming feature, right? And I understand that, because the thought that's always gone through my head as being a drummer is that I'd like to think that I can make a tuna can sing.
Mm-hmm.
That to be that good. That's always been my goal as a drummer, to be that musical that all I can have is a tuna can, full or empty, and that I could make that make music from there, and from that point, expanding that. And that's why one of the reasons I wanted to get into Logic is so I could start seeing how the other side of music production was, because I could do the percussion, but then there was the melody. Like, if I couldn't hit it, it would be very difficult for me to create a melody. Like, sitting down and learning guitar, it's not going to happen. I can't coordinate my fingers. I don't want to pick up a guitar. I know it's a piano. Okay, that's a percussion instrument in a way.
Sure.
But in terms of developing that musical ability, is to have that ear that you think and are able to go, okay, that sound can be made into, given the right context, can be made musical. And so one of the things I've been working on a lot is just natural, organic, like clapping, snapping, using what's around me as creating music. The latest one was when I heard they were aerating our vents. I don't know why, but I heard it, and it was like going dum 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 dum. I'm going, oh man, this is EDM right here.
Yeah.
I gotta zone out for a minute here. This is fantastic. And I recorded a bit of it, and I popped it up, or put it into Logic Pro. I'm like, yeah, I could see how you could mess around with this, and how the bass sound, or the basic sound that you're given, can then be modified, and all the frequencies can be changed into even more. So there's the initial musicality that you're given with that recording, and then in post-production you can take it and either butcher it or make it sound even better.
For people, again, who are listening to this and who maybe don't have that experience with the DAW, obviously we're talking about software like Logic Pro X, and we're talking about Ableton, we're talking about Cubase, and we're talking about
Audition,
Studio One Professional, we're talking about
Pro Tools,
we're talking about Bitwig, we're talking about, which is apparently a big player, and they've just had a new release come out just recently. But without going away from your point, which is kind of very interesting, because I'm only recently into Logic, and Logic, I came into Logic at Pro X. Now they've just put out the 10.5 upgrade. I don't know if you've got that yet, but it's absolutely insane. So the point of view, my point for referencing that is that what you're talking about is so incredibly intense. You can take whatever you want. You can take a drum beat, just a straight up 1-bar drum beat. You can sample that and then mix it around all over the place. Now in Ableton this was very easy to do, but it was less easy to do in Logic until they brought in the new sampler.
Oh really? Is that what happened?
Yeah, Logic's sampler was what was called EX24.
Oh yeah, they had that before. Yeah, that's what 10.5. They just put that in because that's the iPad version.
Totally.
GarageBand that they finally merged with Logic
Oh
Pro.
man, I mean the interface between iPad and Logic and what it allows you to do. And you're sitting there. I mean, you know, I use something that's an addition to the studio since you were last here is a Mackie MCU MIDI controller. It's
Okay.
absolutely sensational. But having said that, there's a piece of hardware that sits in front of the computer monitor, and it costs a lot of money. Whereas if you've got a freaking iPad, you can just do all the same thing. Plus, you can have full control over Logic on your iPad. It's absolutely unbelievable. That means you can just simply stand up and it takes people away from having to sit down for one thing. It's great because it takes you away from the desk.
Yeah.
Unless you've got a multi, you can raise your desk and lower your desk or whatever.
Which is a good idea, but
it's a great idea, but I mean, that costs money too, you know what I mean? And also for a lot of us in working in studios and stuff here in China, we're not, we never know from one day to the next how long we're actually going to be in this city, this country.
sadly. Well, I know every 3 months, I think, that's sort of,
When you
whenever I
think
pay
about it,
rent,
that's
I
right.
pay rent, I'm like, okay, I'm good for another 3 months, unless visa problems.
Well, talk about that. I was good for 28 days.
Right.
From January to February, February to March, March they gave 60 days, right? Then it was like April to May, I think it was like, am I going to get the visa? Am I going to get 30 days? Or am I going to be told to go? And then when I went back at the end of May, they said, listen, Buster, you got no hope of leaving, so we're just going to So they've extended it for 2 months now. So,
Right. Oh, wow.
But so, the idea of building a permanent studio is always a difficult decision to make. It's very costly as well. As you know, I had to ship a whole studio. And now there's a second studio because I built up the stuff since the previous one was gone. Because to live here without any sort of recording equipment in this period of COVID was an impossibility. So
Not possible.
just not possible. I mean, I would have, without having the upgraded studio or the new studio come on in, purchasing a Mac and a few other little things along the way, little mini keyboard and some other things. Without having had access to that, I probably would have gone insane in this period of time.
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, and one of the good things about this last 6-7 months is that I've had the ability to sit down and finally learn Logic Pro, which is basically what you said to do last year. You're going to have to sit down for 6 months and just learn it. Just do it.
I think that's...
but then you said something else that really bothered me. Just Google it. Just YouTube it. I'm like, fucking Christ, God. VPN issues prevent me from just YouTubing anything.
makes it difficult for anyone who's not living in China.
And I don't think they appreciate that. And it's not just China. I mean, there's other countries that have internet restrictions as well.
Yeah.
And even in Canada, I mean, it is beautiful to think here in China, you're going, oh, blame it on the Great Wall, the Great Firewall. Then you go back to Canada, and you try to access the internet. You're going, why can't I access the internet? Why is it so slow? And then it turns out there's some sort of issue network-wide in your city that just happens to be the problem that day.
I'm actually moving into a zone where I'm moving to in a place called Tasmania, just in the east coast of Tasmania, that there's, in all the countryside that's there, or the bush, as they're referred to down there, there's a little cluster of blue dots. Apparently I'm living in the cluster of blue dots, but it's not 100% clear as to what I'm going to get on the internet. My dream, of course, is to go there and have totally free internet, not have to use a VPN with great speed. It may be a long way away from what I'm imagining to the reality on the ground. Now, that's the point. I mean, we've been able to use this time here, if the first part of what I said was kind of true, and it is, you cannot go forward on a DAW or on a film editor or on any piece of software.
Physical piece, right?
Yeah, you can't move forward on it unless you stop and devote an amount of time to it. Now, there's no surprises to realize that the globe from January to July, effectively, has intensified in its use of software. This is a revolution. We've gone through this revolution.
We're all digitized now.
Yeah, totally. Because I mean, you look at the number of hits now that are going on uploads onto YouTube and stuff like that. As for not self-help, but tutorials about how to to connect with the world from sitting inside your room. And one of those things, of course, is live streaming. There's just so much information there about live streaming with different elements of software on your computer, where you can integrate all those into the one live stream, where people are now projecting their images digitally.
Are you live streaming now? Like,
I was doing it on Facebook very early on, but I've been live streaming since 2010. So I sort of figured, I got to the point where I'm tired of copycats. You know what I mean? Not quite. I'm not trying to play, look, I've been ho-hum, this whole world catching up to me kind of thing. Not really like that. I was, there's another reason why I sort of stopped streaming as much, was simply overexposure. I mean, who wants to go onto Facebook, with respect to my friends, and then they get this, oh, there's Steve streaming again, come on, he was streaming yesterday, come on, he was streaming. I did it early on in this COVID thing because it was great, because it was helping me. I was missing playing live, and that I was playing live in Beijing quite a lot, and
all over China.
All over China.
You lived a life of insanity. I don't know how you did this. Because our job used to require us to travel quite a bit, and you were always, all of a sudden, posting pictures of some bar that you were in. How did you find the time to get there? I don't understand.
Well, it was intense. Leave it at that. But it was incredibly fulfilling, and I didn't realize how fulfilling it was until, of course, it all stopped, and stopped. It did. So initially, the pickup on that was through going to live stream on Facebook and that kind of stuff. But I wasn't happy with the idea that I wasn't able to fully utilize the studio, so I was never getting the real sound that I wanted. Having said that, I was getting a very immediate sound. Put up like a little thing here, a little stand here, put a phone onto it, and I was using a USB microphone, what's it called, a Yeti USB mic, for fine microphones, and I was picking up just the room sound, but I just wasn't getting, at least I thought I wasn't getting the sound that I really wanted to get. Then I started to move into things like OBS Studio, along with...
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it's a damn fine studio. Now, going back into 2012, 13, 14, 15, I was using XSplit on the PC format. It's the same kind of deal. I wasn't familiar with what was happening in the Mac world then, because I wasn't using a Mac. But the OBS Studio, it works on both platforms. It's wicked. It's really insane stuff. And you can interlink that with Zoom, and then with Zoom you can have, and with Skype and all that kind of stuff, meaning you can have damn good visuals. You can have multiple cutaway screens, so you can be doing things in terms of tutorials and stuff like that, or in terms of online education, really good kind of software to have. Yeah. So I started to do some live streams with that, but realistically it was just more problems, logistical problems. And I spent, we mentioned before, a guy called Lee, the drummer down in Melbourne. He and I back and forth for a solid month on different cameras, different software, different protocols to have, and whatever. It was intense, and it was great, and we both got success for what we were looking at. But then, do I want to do that every time I'm going to do a live stream? No, it was just
so what did you settle on for your setup?
Yeah. Well, for the live stream setup, it was kind of cool actually. I was using Ableton. I decided to use Ableton because it was kind of easy to use. I used what's it called? Oh damn, I've forgotten it. It's a sound option that allows you to. It's an integrated sound option that allows you to talk from your software. Drag the sound from your software into the OBS Studio. Is it called? It's got. I've just forgotten the name of the software. It's a sound option, so I use that as well, along with OBS and along with Ableton to put the sound out. And then I was using either my phone with an NDI protocol to use the phone actually as a camera.
Right.
But then I also had a couple of Logitech USB cams, and they actually had better quality. So I just opted for those in the end, so I could run it with 2 cams or 1 cam.
Which cameras were you using? Are they 4K or are they?
No, they're 1080s.
Right.
1080s. No,
I have this problem that one of the reasons I haven't started video streaming this thing just yet is because I want to shoot it in 4K. This is only 1080p. This Xiao. I bought this when I first came to China.
Right.
But my GoPro died.
I heard you say that just recently. So.
Oh, apparently I was using the wrong SD card for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And I burned it. I burned the thing out. And I was on tech support with this girl, and she's like, "Well, can you do this?" And I go, "Okay, yeah, nope, can't do that. Can you do that?" Nope. And I'm searching online. And you got to press these buttons, and you got to hold them for this sequence, and you got to do this. I bought a new battery. I got a new charger. I replaced the SD card, and she's like, "Well, this is the final thing we can try if you do this." And I was like, "Hold this button and these things for this amount of time, and it should reset the camera. If it doesn't turn on, then I'm sorry, sir, your camera is fried."
That was here or back in Canada?
I was on tech support. It was chatting because
okay.
I can't call people behind this great firewall. It's the Skype quality is shit. It's just garbage. So I don't bother calling people. If I do online chat, then at least it has a chance.
There
to
is
stay.
some. So you were trying Skype to Skype, so to speak.
This was just online chat.
Right. Okay. Online chat is great, but one of the things that has helped me immeasurably over the years has been Skype's. Now I think One World is the airline flying alliance and an airline alliance. Is it something very similar with Skype, whereby you actually get a phone number, and with that phone number, you can call multiple countries free of charge.
But is that through Skype?
Through Skype, yeah.
Canada wasn't part of that. I know. I heard about this like 10 years ago.
Come to think of it, I don't think it was. Yeah.
Australia was one of the few ones. Same with the United States.
The United States is good because they cover landline and cell phones.
Yeah.
Australia doesn't cover cell phones, which is a real hassle. And
I couldn't sign up for it back in Canada. I was just like, are you kidding me? What is wrong with this country?
They didn't sign on.
Well, the reason why is because there's only like 3 carriers in Canada. There's Bell, there's Rogers, and there's TELUS. And there used to be MTS, which was in my home province, but Bell took them out, so they bought them out. So there's only like 3, and they basically created a blockade of like anybody else coming in, which blocked Microsoft from using Skype as a phone number.
Ah, the Rogers,
Yeah.
because that makes communication when things go south. Like I know we talked before about Waves plugins, and Waves have got really damn good support. You can actually get through to their tech department anytime, so long as it's within the working hours. And using phone calls direct with those guys, where they would go in post that, like within the phone call, they would simply move on to the what's that software that controls your computer again?
Like remote software?
Yeah, remote software. There's
desktop remote or something.
Yeah, desktop remote, something along those lines. They'd simply come in. So you'd be on the phone, they'd be controlling your computer, and they'd be getting and solving the problems like that.
Yeah.
And that would make you feel, because it's very easy to feel disconnected when you're a long way away. Very easy, and you can feel sometimes that you're up against it. How am I going to solve it? Because you're not just solving one problem. As in the studio, you're solving multiple problems.
There's always more than one problem.
To anybody who is, because I can sort of speak to some extent as a grand older statesman of doing this kind of stuff.
But you're still only what, 35?
Yeah, 37. I said the other day. That's my max age, and I'm topping it. I'm stopping at 37. I'm topping at 37 as well. But for anybody who wants to get into this idea of, so you want to make your own films, make your own music, or produce your own media, you have to seriously think about, I'll have no time for work. Because there's just no time for work. Because ultimately it's an all-encompassing package. Once you enter into it, it's a day-to-day situation. And no matter how much stuff is committed to memory in terms of software, and how you can save this and save that, each day is different. You wake up and every day is a new problem. Yesterday it worked smoothly, but today it's not working smoothly. What is it? Because there's a third-party problem that's come on in, and you don't know how to solve that problem. And somewhere along the way, in the next 24 hours, you're going to have to reach out to somebody, because either through a tutorial or to, like a chat line or something like that, or just hopefully somebody you can find who knows how to do it, because that's what's going on.
My approach has been, especially when I hear or see people start these things, and I remember this being a problem 15 years ago when I was back in Winnipeg, that I'd meet these musicians who were getting into a lot of digital music production, but they'd get so enraptured in the technology. And I find this with sound engineers. Sound engineers, I think, are some of the worst people to be in a band with, because then they sit there going, no, we can't do that. You got to make it sound perfect. And you're going, no, just press record and then publish it. And like, it's more of the, just get it done so we have a record, and then we can listen back to it, see what we did wrong, and then know for it next time.
Yeah,
So when I see people start that, I'm like, make it simple for yourself. Make it really easy. Press record, make sure it records, and then publish it. And then from there, you can start working on, okay, well, I heard this, the room noise. How do I deal with room noise? Okay, so then you look up, just solve the problem of room noise for your next recording.
That's the idea of, and in fact, it's funny you should say that, because I was in that same conversation last night with the guy that does all my artwork. And there'll be a support link, because I know that Steve's going to put something
Sure,
up on
yeah.
him. And there's a lot of artwork there that I've been working with this guy for years now, who does all the design stuff for me.
And what's his name?
His name is Levin Staines. He's out of Brisbane.
Okay.
And we were discussing last night this, because we've got a new T-shirt release coming up, something I'm really happy about. I'll talk about it in a bit.
Did he design the Two Bitsville?
He did Two Bitsville.
Okay, right.
Going back into 2014, that was the first album on the so-called Comeback Trail. He designed that sleeve. So he's been with me ever since that time. That was his first with me.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the singer going back many years ago.
Wow.
In the band that I was in. We lost contact for over 20 years as we went to different parts of the world, blah, blah, blah. But last night we're in this conversation, which was exactly what you were saying about. You're in a band situation and you're with sound engineers, and all you want to do is just get something out, and they're going, you can't do it because of this, you can't do it because of that. So all I'm saying is, listen, we just got to get these T-shirt designs done. I've already got the designs done through my brother, who's a designer, and another couple of people as well, including Levin as well, who's going to be designing some shirts too. And I was just simply saying, let's get the designs up there into a portal. Let's, for example, say Shopify or Ecwid through my own personal website, blah, 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 linking to that, and then to other portals as well. Let's get them out there, and then we'll deal with the printing side and the quality that comes from it. We'll deal with that later. Let's just get the product out there. This is not a time to sort of say, because how many projects, get stopped when people confront that wall of difficulty, and they'll go, well, I can't do it because it's too difficult right now. And so they back away from it. And that's where I was about to say a moment back, and this gets back to something I was talking about before as well, where you publicly expose your imperfections, because it's through the imperfections that you improve, which is what the point you were saying as well. Yeah. That is,
But even still, when you press publish, it's still good enough. Like you're still proud of it and go, but that's good. And one thing that I have with music or any media production is that when I publish it, I go, would I watch this? Would I spend time on this? I go, yeah, I would. Even though I find that even once I press publish, it's especially with the blog writing is like one of those things. When do I press publish? It's when I can't stand the thought of going through it again. I'm like, no way, I can't do it. I am not reading this whole thing again. Just press publish. Yeah, but then I come back to it later on, and I read it, go, oh yeah, that's actually pretty good. Same with music.
I think I'm a 9 for 10 there. I think, 9 out of 10 times I think I'm getting it right. And then every now and again I'll get one that's just like, I should have done that. My idea is that, again, that's that imperfections. You allow people, that's how you can judge the merit of somebody, because you can actually go, well, look, there's some work that they've done. It's not that good, but then wait a minute. They also did that piece there as well. And I've definitely got moments like that. I think of all the stuff that I put online, there's one song on Two Bitsville, as a matter of fact. It's a song called Dust, and the song itself is a really great concept related to the drought in Australia, the drought and the way that it affects farmers, and countries all over the world have these sorts of problems. If it's not a drought, it's something else. And the song was something that was kind of special to me, because it was partially written by a guy who I don't have much contact with anymore. Lyrically, it was then taken over by a guy that I have more contact with in these days and have had for many years now. And then there's also my part as having written the music for it, and I thought the music was really kind of cool. Actually, it connects in a strange kind of way to Gangster Paradise, because it's 4 chords, rolling back to back to back. But a massive production. I had lots of things happening here, there, everywhere. I had different narrators coming in for an intro component to the song, all this kind of stuff. But in the end, the mix that I came up with and my own vocal performance didn't come up to scratch. And it goes back now about 1.5 years back, and some guys in Australia play a lot of my work on their radio station. And I happened to be listening in unannounced, not just listening into the radio station one night. They play some great roots music, and I really love to listen to
Which
the
is good to
station.
do. You have that sort of omniscient look. You're like, okay, I'm just going to listen as everybody else is listening.
Yeah, totally. But to my frustration
Oh.
and ultimately despair, they played one of my songs, and it was like they played that song. Of all the songs, they played the one song. I obviously liked the song.
And that's the thing, where you publish it and you're going, nah, it's horrible, and then someone, but they're like, I like the feeling behind it, the emotion, and that catches a lot of people.
Totally.
I mean,
totally,
especially with music, you sit there going, yeah, no, as a music production engineer, you can sit there and go, nah, I don't like how I use that I should have panned it just a little bit more to the left. I could have, bumped up the EQ or something,
right.
sharpened this, tightened that up. And then, but people are listening to me, no, I mean, you could have done all of that and it still wouldn't have changed the idea of the song.
And the way that I heard, as a listener, the way that I heard it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then, from what you just said then as well, you become almost just like those sound guys that you were talking about before. You become so critical of the whole thing, in which case you're defeating the purpose.
Yeah.
It's just, because how can you predict what another person is going to actually hear? Some of the, over the years, some of the takes that I've done or dummy records that I've done that people have actually heard and I've recoiled on, they've actually gone, wow, man, really, I can see where you're getting at. I mean, radio stations would play my stuff going back into the 1980s. And I would be like, oh, you're kidding me. Like, you're gonna play that? I mean, I've got this stuff over here.
Yeah.
No, we're gonna play
New
this
material, and you're playing that stuff.
Yeah, but I remember it was my brother taught me this one a long time ago in terms of something you said before about a producer of this, that, and the other, and how you want this and you want that. And he told me this story that there's a very famous, or relatively famous producer going back into the 70s, and it was an American dude called Lou Reisner. And Lou Reisner was behind some things, Rod Stewart, Elton John, The Who, the musical Tommy that came out in the 1970s.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Lou Reisner was a part of that thing, and my brother was connected to Lou by virtue of the industry. He was a designer, and he was doing a lot of record covers and all that kind of stuff, and he was connected to that. And Lou, as a producer, would always say to my brother, you got to listen to this piece of music, but you got to listen to it loud. You got to listen to it loud. Everything was loud, because if it was loud, you defeat all the noise. Just pump it out, just blow it out.
Right.
And over the years, I've actually learned to temper my own emotions. Like, yeah, sure, I want everybody to listen to the music the exact same way I listen to it. Headphones on, banging you to the max, so you can hear everything blown up. But of course, people don't listen to music like that. People listen to music when they're doing the ironing.
Well, and
when
also
they're having
a
a
lot
shower.
softer, I think. I mean, because this has always confused me. Maybe I'm different in that when I'm listening to music through my headphones, I usually have it cranked up horribly loud, actually, unsafely loud. That for like EDM or metal, whenever there's a double kick drum, I'm like, it has to be a lot louder. But other people, they listen to these gentle songs, and they can still have a conversation with you with their headphones in. I can't. I have to take my headphones out and go, sorry, what?
Yeah.
Because like if I have my headphones in, there's no way other sounds coming in, because I don't want other sound coming in.
No, because you're focused.
Yeah.
You're presumably focused on what it is you're listening. You're listening for something.
But apparently some people listen to it actually at a safe level, and they don't try to like listen to the music through their bones. It's just through their eardrums, and they don't want their eardrums to ring afterwards. It's bizarre.
It is, and you have to weigh that up as to how people are going to listen to the music. I mean, I don't see myself as I like a hard-assed and hard-edged guitar as much as anybody. But in the end, people are going to listen to the music the way that they want to listen to it. So in the end, something that I've worked harder towards in the last, particularly in the last 2 years, and more so in terms of this last 6 months, because I've been concentrating heavily on production, how to produce and get that definitive sound inside my music. I'm not there yet, but I'm getting closer, I sort of feel, is that people are going to listen to music as a package where no matter what it is that you're saying musically, if you can get that package controlled, that people can listen to it at multiple levels of volume, like variable levels of volume, and take in an emotion from that at either a low volume or a maxed out volume. If they can get that feeling, then I know I'm beginning to do my job as a producer of music.
So what level do you mix at? Like for me, the standard when I'm sitting at with headphones on, I use these KRK 858s. I think they're flat headphones, like they're meant for mixing. And I have my laptop set at bar number 4, and then Logic is all at 0, right? So 0 dB. But the MacBook volume level is at 4. And if I can
4 out of 10,
4 out of whatever, like the volume is 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right. Okay.
Right. So it's that level it's not the full 10. It's 4 out of 10, I guess.
Okay.
And then with that, I go, if I can listen to it comfortably and for a long period of time, that's the level that I mix at. I don't increase the volume. I don't increase the laptop volume. I increase the volume in Logic. And if I can't do that, then I have to look for other ways to increase the volume, so whether it's a compressor or something else, or throwing it through a sidechain and boosting the gain that way or something.
Well, that's I didn't pay much attention to how I was listening to here I am monitoring these songs, and I used very good monitors in the studio. I can't use those right now because I don't have them, because they're in the docks in Melbourne.
Which ones did you use?
I was using in the end BM8s from M Audio, but I was also using a BM3 also from M Audio, which are desktop speakers, and I bought those 12 years ago here in China, and they're brilliant. I love them. I learned to mix on those kind of like little desktop speakers, so I wasn't listening to it at a very large volume. I was using some AKG headphones, which were studio headphones, and then some Behringer headphones that I bought in a city in Harbin in 2003, and they're the ones that I'm using even today, because they're the only ones I've got here right now. So I certainly know how they sound. They're not great headphones by any stretch of the imagination, but they handle the job of mixing and mastering as well, in terms of like using a DAW with a computer. But what I wasn't paying attention to in the past was how loud I was listening to the music, and I was listening to it very loud for lengthy periods of time. And there were days where I had ringing in my ears, and I would walk away. Got a little story about this one. Walk away with just thinking, oh, this is just not right. You're doing something wrong here, because you can't hear out of your right ear anymore. Yeah. And to this day, I will not use a phone. I hate a phone conversation at the best of times. I struggle to have phone conversations. It just hurts me, but I will not use my right ear so I only use my left ear for talking on the phone. But the hearing on right and left is equally the same. But I think probably on my right ear, I may be beginning to lose, as happens with age, you roll off a little bit in the higher frequencies. So probably around about, 10K or whatever, I might not be hearing the same in my right ear as I'm hearing in my left ear. I just want to cut away to that little anecdote. It was 2008. I was working on a bunch of songs. I wasn't seriously back into music at the time, or at least I thought I wasn't seriously back into it, but I was spending a fair amount of time, and I was proficient enough in 2008 to be actually working on a volume of songs that 4 or 5 years later did get compiled into an album. And 2008, it was around about August, I believe. And so here we are, we're getting ready in 2008 for the Olympic Games. They're coming up, so this could have been July. Olympic Games are coming up in August the 8th, blah, blah, blah. And I'm working on this bunch of songs. And it was a pretty free time. I'd only recently been split up from a girlfriend within a couple of years. So I was living a pretty full-on kind of life. It was I was drinking a lot of alcohol at the time. And I was listening to a lot of music, very, very loud, blowing my head out each night while I'm getting smashed in my so-called studio, which was just like a bedroom, blah, 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 blah. So one thing led to another, and I must have gone too far on this listening to the music too loud, and all of a sudden the reality was, oh my God, I've done my right ear, I've blown my eardrum. So I'm walking around, not for just a day, I'm walking around for days. Oh my God, I can't hear. I have to sort of, blow into my nose, this kind of thing, try to clear my ear. Nothing would happen. There was a constant ringing of my ear. I'm feeling as if my whole world is caving in. And then there was this day, and I forget the actual date, but I'm on the edge of my bed. I'm depressed. I'm as depressed as a motherfucker can be. It's like I'm losing my hearing, and to boot, as I'm covering my right ear, covering my left ear, I'm losing my balance as well. And then I remember this, I crossed over my left leg, over my right leg on the edge of my bed. I covered up my my left ear, so my bad ear was the one that I was actually hearing with, and all of a sudden, everything started to shake. It was like shaking. Oh my God, I was like, oh no, shit, I've lost my hearing. Oh, I can't, this is ridiculous. I can't hear anymore. It turned out that what was happening, some 3,000 or 4,000 miles away to the southwest, was this massive earthquake.
That was the Sichuan earthquake.
The Sichuan earthquake.
Yeah.
Yunchun?
I can't remember.
I can't remember the actual name, but it was in Sichuan. And it was in Yunnan.
Was it the Yunnan earthquake? Okay.
It was the Yunnan earthquake, and the shaking that I was feeling was actually the building, the tall building that I was living in, because the whole Beijing was shaking over 3,000 kilometers away as well at that precise time.
Yeah.
It was 2 days later that I found that out. the hearing loss was temporary. It was just because I'd blown myself out. I was listening too loud. I tend to control now. What I do, if I really want to get a level, I really want to experience it at a loud volume, I'll blow it out there for a period of time, but for a short period of time. Then I'm going to bring it back to a level that's sort of far more moderate. I'm listening to, on a sound card that I'm using, I'm listening to around about 25%. Okay. But the same as you, on the faders, Unity is 0 dB. I'm always using, I'm trying to work, and something I'm working at a lot these days is working with all my faders at Unity, but then I'm working on my gain. So I'm controlling my gain.
Also, you do your gain different.
I'm using gain differentials for each particular channel, whatever it is. So it could be drums, bass, or whatever, all the different microphones in a drum kit. Or if I'm breaking out the drums from Logic, I'll still have different, because some drums are going to be louder than other drums, and I'll be controlling the volumes through their individual gains. Something that I've picked up from just reading different tutorials, but also from and listening to what guys were saying about how when you take away from Unity on the fader, you're also taking away different sonic qualities.
Oh, is that what it is?
So it started to make a little sense to me. It's very difficult to actually pinpoint the difference, but I just noticed that the mixes that I'm getting now compared to, say, 6 months ago, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, they're stronger mixes.
Because when you take down the master fader, not the master fader, but the fader on that track, you're bringing all the frequencies down.
You're bringing all the frequencies
whereas
down.
the gain just targets a certain frequency.
Well, you can actually target a certain frequency if you want to come in through with that gain. You can actually set that to a multi-band. You can actually set up a multi-band compressor or
Right.
A compressor, and you can actually target a particular frequency and bring that particular gain down as well. That can be a positive as well. I mean, it's not just it's like a rule of thumb to try to keep all the faders at Unity. Whereas in the past, what I would do, let's say I had all the faders coming in, they were all at multiple different levels to get a mix, and then they were all being summed to come over to the master fader. And on the other hand, people are saying on the master fader, keep the master fader minus 6 dB, so you're allowing headroom for a mastering engineer to come in with your mix, and then to add this, add that, which all adds extra volume. Okay, so you need a ceiling of 6 dB to be able to handle that. The rule of thumb now is that because we're working on, I don't fully understand this, but because we're working on floating bit 32 floating bit, 64 floating bit as well. Right now, distortion and clipping is no longer the same as it was when we were working in the analog world.
It doesn't technically happen, yeah.
It
Because
doesn't.
I remember I sent you that clip, that djembe clip that I had where it was maxed out, but I'm listening to it and there's no distortion. And
That's
I sent
right,
it to
yeah,
you,
yeah,
I'm like
yeah.
going, but it looks distorted, like, because it's flatlining on
Yeah,
both
yeah,
sides.
yeah,
I'm going,
yeah.
okay, it's a brick of sound in Logic, but I'm not hearing anything. And it has something to do with that 32-bit floating point, whatever it is. But
You got it in one. That's exactly
But
right, yeah.
with that, apparently that's only if it's listened to within a digital realm. If you take it out to an analog source, you might hear clipping. But with that, there's even some give. It's like it's clipping. It's distorted but not distorted.
Definitely, when I bought the mixes that I was doing back into my analog, my Allen and Heath Z16 desk that I love, although it's a Firewire desk, so it's a sound card as well as a 16-channel desk as well. Again, that's in the docks in Australia. I could be producing something on a computer that was exactly what you're saying. It's just a brick wall. And I used, for a lot of times, I was using Radiohead as my reference tracks, different albums, different songs of theirs that I would have, and that would be my reference track in my mastering stage. And what those tracks were just a block. It was just a brick. You know, you had to really expand that brick out to see that there was some dynamic activity taking place. But if that was all just compressed into like a track that was just simply not...
You just looked at it from fully zoomed out.
Yeah, this was fully zoomed out. It was just like nice, because I wasn't going to get that word in the month of Sundays. It would just be a brick, just a total brick. And you would say, well, how could that possibly not be clipping? Well, in the computer it wasn't clipping. But as it came back into the desk, there were those unmistakable red lamps sort of flickering. You know, you're pushing this to the max.
But could you hear it? Could you hear any clipping when you pushed it out?
No.
Yeah.
Now, the problem was that I got caught out with this, because the problem was that I did a couple of masters based on the idea, look, I mean, you know, like, I don't hear clipping here. The desk is telling me that this is clipping, but I don't hear any clipping. But
So,
then people on the other end are playing it on their phones or whatever, and they're sort of like, this is pretty distorted. You know?
That, and I've noticed I get a headache when it's too loud like that. My ears, and when I have to take off the headphones, I go, ow! What's happening? That's usually when I'm going, something's not right in the mix. And that could also be actually the effects that I'm using. I might be boosting the gain or some frequency where you're going, it might not, you can't audibly hear it, but your brain is picking it up and your ears are picking it up because they're sensitive to those frequencies. But yeah, when I see the hit red, I try to get away from red anyway, just to be safe. Bring it down another couple dB, but I use the master faders right now, not the master, but like on each channel, I just bring down the full volume.
Right.
But
well,
maybe I'll start doing the gain instead.
the gain thing set to unity. Now this is because of course I was caught up in this world of which way would I do it. I started to sort of talk about the idea that you've got this, you have your master fader down 6 dB, this is going back into, say, a mixing situation for me about 1 year ago. You have your master fader down to minus 6 dB. Then you've got your other faders at varying levels. Now, what I was doing to get around the problem when I was still seeing red or there was still some clipping somewhere along the way around that was to select every track as a select all, bring down one fader. They all come down relative to each other.
Yeah.
But in the end, by doing that, you're taking away certain sound quality from the idea that you're reducing all the sounds. You're taking away different qualities from each sound as you reduce the sound.
Yeah.
The alternate approach was to keep all your faders at unity, and even keep the master fader at unity as well. To use gain on individual tracks to make sure that each track is working between minus 18 to minus 12 dB. And you're well below zero at that level. And as you look across, you might have 20, 30, 40 tracks, you might have 2 or 3 tracks, it doesn't really matter. The fact is you're looking at green, 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 green. But in the real proof in the pudding is in the headphones. The headphones are really comfortable.
So what do you mean? You're saying that you're using the gain and all the tracks that you've selected, you're turning that down to
In its
12 to 18, minus 12.
So whatever that track is, let's say that there's no problem with this track whatsoever. I've got my fader set to unity. it's running at around about -3 or 4. It's comfortable. It's never peaking. There's no clipping or anything like that. What I'm now doing is looking for the sweet spot, and everybody talks in the industry, in the recording industry, as the sweet spot is between -18 to -12.
Is that why Logic automatically does that when I import a clip? Every time it does.
Is that what it's doing?
I get it. It turns it down to like -18. I'm like, oh, maybe that makes sense. And with this thing, they're saying, yeah, it's with the zoom, you gotta hit -12 on the recording.
-12 being the high point for
Yeah.
people that are not sort of familiar. -18 obviously underneath, and then you're rising up to 0.
But yeah, Logic brings it right down 0. Not 0, but I mean it drops it
down.
right down.
Yeah. I hadn't noticed that. It's one of the things I have noticed.
Because you record right into Logic. I'm taking clips and I'm dropping them.
Okay, yeah,
Right.
exactly, yeah, totally. That's why I wouldn't have been aware of that. One of the things I have noticed is that Logic has struck me. This is probably I have no real evidence to prove this. It's just struck me as being more alive with its faders, hotter with its faders than particularly with Ableton. So for many years, for about 4 or 5 years, I pretty much worked exclusively on Ableton. From 2014 through to 2019, I was pretty much exclusively on Ableton, and all of a sudden I started to move over to Logic and back again to Cubase, and then now Studio One Pro, which I love, by the way. And Logic just seemed to be really hotter on the faders. Like you put a track in, bang, this is already, it's yellowing out, almost redlining out.
Okay.
So I've had to work a little harder there with its gain structure to make sure that I'll go in. So if I am working on a normal project for me might have, obviously it's going to have drums and bass, at least 2, but possibly more, up to 4 guitars if I'm thinking about overdubs, and then the incidental instruments like strings and all that kind of stuff. I could run 20 tracks in a project, so I will go through and control all those, the gain structure on all of those tracks, and now I'm getting some really comfortable levels, and I'm getting better mixes going into the mastering stage. So the mixes I'm doing now, I think I've done some pretty good mixes in the past where I've been relatively creative, but I just think I'm getting better sound quality mixes at the moment. I think that, so, if I'm hearing things the right way by working at the -18 to -12 across the board. And as I said to some people in an Ableton forum in Facebook just the other day, some people were talking about this issue of clipping and blah, 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 and I pointed out the idea of the -18 to -12. But the big issue is not so much, there's a bigger issue, and that is what takes place between the plugins. As people are passing sound from one plugin, moving into another plugin, moving into another plugin, that's where you get a lot of clipping and a lot of hidden clipping, where all of a sudden it winds up as you're being distorted, but you can't see where the distortion's coming from. You've got to go back in and look at your plugins to find out as you transfer from one plugin, like from an EQ to a compressor into a delay, or
that's something that I didn't understand, because like with video production, and I think we've talked about this before, video production, when you apply an effect, it doesn't matter which order the effect goes in. I mean, aside from like the final color grade, or like the final coloring, tweaking of the hue or the saturates, like the final print, but you could put one effect, like a distortion effect, on top of a radio transmission effect, on top of an old VCR effect, and it all gets rendered in the same way. But with audio production, if you put the compressor first or EQ first, it changes the dynamics of the sound, and then the next plugin only gets whatever the first plugin spits out.
Totally.
So it gets rendered sequentially, whereas in video production it's all at once.
Yeah, that's a big issue. The two processes you just talked about, EQ and compression, that is a debate in itself.
But even in terms of like adding the one plugin I use, the expander, because I found that I was looking for a way to cut out the room noise, and one of the fixes is apparently using the high expansion plugin, and so I just put that in there, the default value of high expansion. That seems to cut out a lot of room noise that goes on in some of the recordings.
Right.
So that one worked. But the other ones, yeah, in terms of like putting EQ first, compression first, limiter first, there's people that argue it, and I go, I don't know.
It's a tough one. At the moment, two things that I kind of have taken on board, but I am in a process of discovery here that I want to get to a level where I feel I become almost incredibly knowledgeable on the issue, and I'm not there yet. Right now, as I was saying to a pal yesterday, I will use whatever software I've been given and use the tool for fixing what it is I'm looking for, or shaping what it is that I'm looking towards, shaping towards something to get to. But I'm still mostly a preset-led person, because all this software comes with presets. Now, the rule of thumb that I've taken on board is, okay, get the order right, so know what you're going to do. If it's EQ first with compression second, or compression first, EQ second, that's the individual penchant. But then get the right setting that you're looking for. If you can't hear it, like initially, because there's a lot of things to take on board, if you can't actually hear it, set to a preset, and then just tweak that preset.
Right.
At least that way you're in the ballpark. Then if you've gone for a particular setting, and then you've got your second plugin or VST on top of that, okay, try to get something that actually follows on from what it is that you know, stay in the same ballpark, so to speak, and just work that way. To minimize the amount of reinvention of the wheel every successive stage. And if you do that economically enough, you'll come up with a damn good non-over-processed sound, but a sound that's really enhanced to allow you to go into the mix stage.
So then what plugins are you using? You got compression, you got
Well,
EQ,
like-
reverb probably.
Definitely. And for me, it was almost like I said a little earlier, I said, you know, when we go back a few years, when a new VST came out onto the market, man, I would buy it because it didn't represent a huge chunk of our income at the time.
At the time.
Besides which, I needed it. I felt I needed it. I felt I needed it to enhance my own exploration in the whole sound and sound recording kind of thing. I wanted the latest toy on the block. I work hard, I could afford it, so I wanted to bring it into the studio to see that my studio was getting a sound that maybe no one else could get.
Right.
But over time, I've defaulted to definitely I'm going to be using compression, and definitely I'm going to be using EQ, because you want to get the best shape, you want to get the sound shaped the right way. But if possible, if I can get that sound coming straight off either an amp emulator, let's say for a guitar.
Okay.
If I can get that sound coming from the amp emulator, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to leave it there. But I am going to add probably some reverb. I won't use the reverb and the delay from the amp emulator because I'm looking to match maybe tempo or whatever. Definitely I'm using, if I'm not happy with that sound, I'm going to use a compressor and I'm going to use an equalizer. Equalizer first for me, compressor second.
Okay.
But what I'm not going to use are a lot of chains or channel strips where everything's all put in. I'm not going to use that because it shapes the sound to a way that's maybe not where I want the sound to go. Particularly if those channel strips include a reverb and a delay, because I do not want to use the reverb and delay on the channel itself. I want them to be a send alone.
Right.
So I can actually choose how much I want of the pure sound that I've got to send over there. Then to have it mixed back in, you could call that parallel processing. To have it mixed in with the sound that I've got, that raw sound. I don't want that defined in my one channel as I'm sending it off to the mix stage. I want to be able to blend the reverb so that I can have maybe just one or two reverbs for a whole project, and then mix all of the instrumentation through those one or two reverbs. And lately what I've been doing is using some convolution reverbs from the various software packages, Waves, and also Ableton's Max for Live, which is really, really sharp. And Logic, I'm just getting into their reverbs and stuff as well at the moment. But convolution reverb, where I can take a real sound from a real environment. So for example, I might want to use the reverb from a particular bank in San Francisco. I go to that reverb convolution of that reverb. I set it the way I want in terms of as a send. It's 100%. I'm using the mix, the effect only, no mix, and then I just send my instruments into that. That's maybe all I use. So I'm using less effects now than I was using 2 years ago, 5 years ago for sure. 5 years ago, my tracks were all loaded up.
We talked a lot about technology, but and you said that you in 2014 was like the restart, the resurgence of your musical career, or
yeah. It was like I made a huge decision by at the end of 2013. I decided that I wanted to record an album in 2014, and unbeknownst to me, much the same as unbeknownst to all of us right now with COVID, we did not know coming out of 2019 that we were entering into a shitstorm in 2020. In 2013, I did not know that I was walking back into a job whereby 1 month into 2014, I was going to lose my job by virtue of some visa complications that many of us who were working here at the time were all caught up in.
I've heard about this. Yeah.
And so I took an initial 3-month cutback, half work only, and then 5 months of no work. So I decided to hang out. I knew that I would be able to get work later in 2014, but I would have to go through a period where I wouldn't work. So I just decided to throw myself into the album that I decided I was going to record anyway.
So then, when you decided to do that, did you have material already ready, or is it that you sat down and went, okay, I'm going to restart everything. Let's relearn the basics and just plow ahead?
What I didn't know how to do was to actually really record. Yes, I knew how to record. I knew how to use. I was using Cubase and I was using Ableton comfortably at the time, and so I knew how to record. I knew how to record songs. I'd already done a few good songs. I felt going back into that 2008 period when my ears
you blew out your ears.
Blew out my ears. Actually, I was probably blowing out other parts of the brain, to be honest. No, in 2013, when I went over to the studio in Melbourne with Lee, the drummer, I knew that he had a very successful studio in Melbourne. I knew that I would be getting him to lay the drums down to 8 songs that I had that I'd been playing live during 2012 and 2013.
Oh, so you were playing before that. It
Yeah.
wasn't like you just resurgence. Now I'm.
No, I was.
That you quit music for a while or anything.
No, I was definitely back into music,
Mm-hmm.
but not full on. It was definitely. I knew that I was good enough to be playing live, so it seemed to be ridiculous for me not to be playing live. And yet here I was not playing live, hiding behind all kinds of, screens and this, that, and the other, and all kinds of excuses. So I had to sort of take myself out there and begin to perform live again. That was actually in September 2012, and through 2013, I just knew that I was getting better. Although I wasn't so good that I wasn't feeling a shitload of nerves before every show. And the shows were not great because. Didn't have my mojo really down pat, but I was getting better and better.
When you're saying you're getting better and better, you have how many albums listed on your website? And you mentioned one, we talked about 2 Bits Bill before. It looks as if you've been releasing albums every year. And how far does this go back? I mean, when you're saying you're getting better and better, I mean, how bad were you before, and what did you need to improve on?
I think it was you get to the point that you're producing work that this gets back to something you were talking about before earlier, with the idea that you do things as a DIY, but then you come up with some problems, and then you realize that there are people out there that are doing it much better. Their work, the quality of their work is much better. I felt that the quality of my work was good.
Right.
I felt that the singing, the vocal arrangements and the vocal production that because I didn't really like the sound of my own voice, and here I was singing and I hated the sound of my own voice and all that kind of stuff. Man, I mean that's not a great way to start. So I sort of thought that I needed to get that under control. By 2012, 2013, I was getting my vocals under control. I was becoming a little more confident about what I could do. The albums that came 2013, I think there was Charlotte Lowe's "Give Me 8." That was with a duo that I was working with a girl, female singer, and I was composing and arranging music for that project. So I decided to record that project with her, and that was a step into recording. But I felt that my recording skills were letting me down. I wasn't as good as I wanted to be.
So you didn't know anything about recording before that? So you'd done it, you knew about it, you've recorded
I knew about
before.
it. I knew that the software I had could record. I knew how to record basic things. There's no worries about that.
But not the in-depth detail that you know now, basically.
Not now, not to the level that I know now. I've never been one to be, as an individual, I've never been one to really articulate the skills that I acquire. I don't seem to be possessed with that kind of, I've never wanted to be a teacher of the work that I do,
right.
for example, because I don't have those skills. I'm a person that takes on board things, commits it to memory, and then begins to practice it until all of a sudden it becomes second nature to me.
Right.
The second nature of what it is that I do, if somebody asked to explain what it is that I'm doing, I would find it very difficult to explain. It's just something that I do. It's a point of view of being possessed when you're at the desk. You know, you get. Yeah, I know how to. You can flow with things because you see things that you don't see in everyday life.
So was there a musical life before 2012? What was that like?
Yeah, fractured and kind of unfulfilled, because the band that I was in back in Melbourne and that was playing through the 80s, we split up at a point in time in my life that I was the so-called leader of the band, but I was the most untogether leader of a band that you could have. I just was not a together individual because I was not happy with my so-called career, whatever it was I was doing. I was working as a teacher and I was a music teacher, but I was not working even permanently. I was what they call a relief supply.
Like a sessional or something like that?
Or? Yeah, working in those. So I just could never seem to get a regular job. Now, you know, what I'm a regular Joe. I was told to you go to school, you get educated, you get a job, and then you support your family. I couldn't do any of that because I never had enough money coming on in.
Yeah.
And the band is working. We're rehearsing, but we were never getting enough shows, and I didn't have the connections. Connections that I'd had in the early 80s by virtue of managing bands. I'd lost those connections.
You were managing bands in the 80s as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Very early on in life I started to manage bands and was doing it quite successfully, but managed because I was hiding behind my own fears of my own musicality.
Right.
You know, like am I good enough or am I not good enough? Oh, I don't think I'm good enough, so I'll manage instead. When in fact I was more than good enough. And just wouldn't allow. I was having ego issues. You could say ego issues. So the band split up. By 1994, the drummer and I, who were still close, we produced two albums. One was called 4 Times Shy, which was a tremendous volume of music that we were playing at the time. Then the next one was called Dust Up. The next one was called In Vaudeville, and it was a 6-track album. Beautiful, great work. But I decided to let it go at that point. The albums did not become successful when I thought maybe they would have some success.
In what way? Like, in terms of volume sold?
So in those days it was cassettes and records and radio release. You had to get radio release, and it just didn't happen.
And is this all in Australia or was
it
this
was all in Australia.
So then how often because Australia is a bit more, that coast, the east coast of Australia is very tight, very close, just like the Eastern Corridor in Canada, where you have like Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, and if you're a band, you can tour that very easily. Whereas like my hometown, Winnipeg, is in the middle of the prairie.
So
I mean, there's no touring.
Limited opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make financial sense to be touring very far unless you're going to like the neighboring town, like Portage la Prairie or Brandon, which are like an hour and a half away. But you wouldn't be getting into a van and doing like a 16-city tour across Canada. You'd have to go down to the States and do that, basically, which required all sorts of visas. Were you able to do that back in those days, or is that what you were doing? Or?
Yeah, that's what I was doing with the managing side of things. But with the playing side of things and the band that I was putting together, I think this gets back to something that I touched on a little earlier as well. Even within the band that I was playing in, fact of the matter was that two of the guys in the band, the drummer and myself, intellectually were tight. Musically, we were proficient in the fact that we knew that we had to rehearse parts and reproduce those parts.
Right.
The same or as close to the same every time out. The singer, who's the art designer now, was pursuing a career and a lifestyle with his wife, child, and that kind of stuff that didn't allow him to make the rehearsals. And the guitarist we were using at the time was a genius on the one hand, and flawed to the point of frustration on the other, that he could neither A, remember pieces that he would have played in the previous rehearsal, and B, for me a real turn-off was that, a frustration, not a turn-off, but a real frustration was that the genius was offset by the fact that he didn't know musical theory.
Right.
And I found that very difficult to work with. It was just, I would be in almost tears at being taken to that level by the majesty of his guitar playing, but then reduced to tears because it would never be played again, or certain parts it was so easy he couldn't reproduce, and with the band would break down in rehearsals, for example. As a consequence of that, our live shows there were some good live shows, but they were too infrequent because the rehearsals didn't allow us to do them.
Mm-hmm.
And they were never, from his point of view, they were very safe, because it was the only way that he could play the songs for a live show, was to play them safe and never really let go. So this driving, as a guitarist myself, and I played bass in that band because we could not get a bass player to do the job, so I actually moved over from guitar to do
So
bass.
you were playing bass?
And I wasn't good enough to hold down the solo guitar spot. I always felt that about myself as a player. I really got a good feel about what I am as a guitarist, but I didn't feel that I was this is the solo guitarist, the man that's going to be the sellout, like the sellout feature of the band with these ripping solos. That wasn't what I was doing in those days. Would I do it in these days? Yeah, I'd love to play solo guitar, because it would mean that all the pressure would be off, right? You get called on every song for 16 bars to do this ripping little solo. Fantastic. I'd love to do that.
But can you? With this is one thing that's always got me about guitar solos. And there were, like, when Metallica released their Saint Anger album, there was a big kerfuffle that Kirk Hammett didn't have any solos. And as a drummer, I sit there going, how often and how much can you solo? How much do you have to say that hasn't been said already in terms of guitar notes? I don't know. Correct me. Where am I going wrong in this understanding?
It's insane, isn't it? Because I would say that every guitarist, except for the truly great guitarists, how you define truly great guitarists is something I'm not sure I know the answer to right now, but I think every guitarist possesses a couple of standard licks.
Yeah.
Standard fretboard positions that guitarist knows how to get to, and can move in and out of those different blocks or positions. Position in guitar terms is oftentimes called position 1, position 2, and position 3, and then that repeats up the fretboard. I think each guitarist can replicate within the particular genre of music they work within. For example, a jazz guitarist or a rock guitarist, and I probably would come from the school of rock / maybe a little bit of blues or whatever, that you get these certain licks, and every solo comes along, you're just rehashing the lick.
You're playing a variation.
It's a variation on a theme, but within that, you're trying to take in, on the variation of the theme, you're trying to take in the context of the music and the emotion of the music, and you would like to think, and I dropped a solo last night on a piece of music in 6/8, which was in the key of B minor, and was a song from the band that I've just been talking about, which I decided last night, which I could do in Logic, going all the way back to the very start of what we've been talking about. that I could break out the drums and get those drums to listen to the bass line.
Oh, there you go.
I'd been thinking about it over the last few days, and man alive, like it just came alive, you know what I mean? So when it was like that, I just thought, well, I'm going to the next level. And it was as simple as drums, bass, the song was already talking. I already knew that. I just had to put some strings, get the right string sound. And once I had that done, I was home. All I had to do was to lay down one guitar track. I think the piece goes for about 3.5 minutes or 4 minutes. I just needed to just be loose for 4 minutes on guitar and hopefully do the right thing, and get the right sound, get the right ambiance, get the right feel. Well, I kind of got that. But did I use any different note formations or whatever that I may have used for a sort of a powerhouse guitar solo that I did a couple of days back or a couple of weeks back? Nah, it was the same stuff. It was like, there's position 1, da-da-da-da, there's position 2, da-da-da, there's position 3. Now make sure you move between those. Oh, don't forget to use your tone selector on your guitar to make sure you've got a different tone here, there, and that's it. It's not rocket science, is it?
Well, yeah, but then you watch a guitarist play a solo and you're going, I don't know how they do this. I mean, moving the fingers that way. But I guess that's more of a practice and technicality. Developing the muscle memory. Because I get the same thing when I'm drumming. People are like, how do you do that?
Yeah,
well,
sure,
I don't
sure.
know. I've been doing it for so long.
That's right. It's muscle memory. There's two things. One is people who just listen to what I said about guitar. I'm not the world's greatest guitarist by a long shot, and I can play it reasonably well, I think, and it's always going to be there on any of the solos that are on my albums and stuff like that. Muscle memory, going back to that point. Mike Tyson is making this comeback. Right?
Yeah,
everybody's talking about it, right? And Mike Tyson's former trainer, a guy called Teddy Atlas, who I could listen to 7 days a week, twice on Sundays, to coin a Tyson Fury cliche. Love listening to Teddy Atlas. And those two had a bit of a fallout, because I think Teddy put a gun to Mike's head and said, listen, if you mess with my sister one more time, I'm going to blow your brains out. That pretty much ended Atlas's and Tyson's relationship. But as Teddy Atlas, who's gone on to become a boxing analyst and trainer and blah, blah, blah over the years, as you said, listen, Tyson can look so good doing what he does at this stage in these clips because it's muscle memory. He's an athlete. And a guitarist and a drummer, and all of us as musicians, we're all just using muscle memory. Some guys have got a muscle memory development or a muscle development that from a guitar point of view can make them go super fast. Would I like to play like those guys? Sometimes, yeah, but I'm pretty happy defaulting to whatever it is that my muscle memory is working at. And I know I can pick up guitar on any day of the week now, so long as I'm in practice, and pretty much crank out a solo. I love being able to do that, and particularly in the job that you and I would do, for example, in the hotels that we would stay in, often I'd just be cranking out that guitar.
Because you always were playing. I mean, it was all the time.
All the time.
But you do a lot of cover songs.
Yeah.
Which I actually have a question about that. How do you get your licensing for your cover songs? Or do you? Well, because for YouTube, you can't publish a song unless you have the rights for it, or it blocks you from monetizing it. And I know there are companies out there that you pay them like $10 or whatever, and they take care of the licensing for you. So I'm wondering, are you doing that sort of thing, or is it one of those things that you need to figure this out as you go forward?
I think it needs to be looked into by anybody that goes down that road. In my case, I learned very young that the theory of the ostrich, just put your head in the sand. And that's been a maxim of my whole life, if when in doubt, just put your head in the sand and hope that things just go past you. I should probably be more responsible about it, but I always make a point in all the covers that I do. I can't say this for live shows, because I have made money from live shows, of course, not much, because of the nature of, say, because I've been doing all the live shows in China. So I haven't made a lot of money from doing it, but I've been paid, I've been remunerated and all this kind of stuff. I've never given over any of the money to do to the bands whose songs I covered. Ethically speaking, I get myself out of this situation by simply saying that I'm playing a song by a particular band, and always I would do this as often as I possibly could. If you think my song's okay or my version's okay, please make sure you listen to their version because it's great. You know what I mean? Like, that's one caveat that I've always tried to use. Even on recorded work, on albums as such, the early albums had no covers on them. They were all original songs.
Okay.
But the 2016 I put out Toil. Toil was a mixture of originals and covers. I didn't really pay attention to, for rights and all that kind of stuff, but I did make a point of, on all the material, it was always well documented that the song was originally written by blah blah blah, and it gave their name and publishing company. I think I did that as well.
The only time it would become an issue is like if you sold 1 million copies or something. Then you'd have someone knocking on your door going, "Hi, we need to talk."
I probably want to address this because it's ahead of me right now as I'm returning back to Australia, and I know that that's going to be a different marketplace again than China. I don't think it'll be as easy for me back in Australia as it has been in China to get exposure to an extent and to have the availability of shows. Having said that, there'll be a lot of fairs and festivals in the island of Tasmania where I can be playing that will allow me to get a constancy of live work, and from that I'm probably going to also get radio play along the way down in Australia, and I've already got radio play in Australia, so I've got to be very careful now looking into the next stage of life, just if I am going to play covers. And I do like to play covers because one of the reasons I like to play covers is that I take from the original song and I'll turn it into my own song, to the point of I'll try to be faithful. There are some things I'll remain faithful to. I might remain faithful to a motif or a riff or something like that, or I'll remain faithful to certain melodic kind of arrangements. But once I've gone there, and this was always a key part of the band that I played in all those years ago called the Repro Masters, and we were called that because the Repro Master, the original drummer, a guy called Gary Devine, was a graphic designer. And he would listen to our music and he'd go, "You know what? You guys are playing this," because he came into the band as a drummer called in to replace somebody else. He said, "You play these covers, but they're imperfect. You're just like in the graphic design world, you're just like a repro master. You make copies, but every copy is imperfect in some way." So that became our kind of a major thing for what we're doing. I've always stated that idea. I can learn more from covering somebody else's song, musically speaking, than I can trying to create, in some cases, my own song, because the map of what it is that I'm trying to do is already laid out. And from that map, and this gets back to that scalar software that I was talking about before, from that map I can then extrapolate and go, okay, well musically I know they've gone from, let's say, from a D minor in the key of C, they've gone from D minor to key of C, they've gone from a D minor to an A minor, a pretty standard, fourth back. But I can get from a D minor to the A minor by going back in through another chord and then shaping and reshaping the melody come on back. And that's just musical games. And I love doing that with covers.
And so many people say that they learn their instrument by playing other people's music. They listen to name a popular rock band from 20 years ago, and they're like, "Yeah, that's how I learned it." See, but I was one of the people, I wanted to reinvent everything. I actually, when I started playing drums, I was like, I literally didn't listen to anything because I wanted to be the most creative, the most original. I didn't realize until foolishly later on that that is such a fallacy, because whatever you think you're going to create has probably been done already, and that you do need to learn those musical dictionary elements, basically, sure. That people have already done, and then you build upon that. And jazz does that quite a bit. Rock music does it to an extent, but I think it's more in the guitarist world that rock would change. But jazz, that's where the drummers, they listen to something and they go, okay, that's what he's playing, that's the motif that we have to keep on, and this is the number of bars that we have to play for it, and then we can vary within that.
We have to think of the audience as well, because the audience to any one particular genre is going there for a reason. They're going there because they want to...
Does it matter about the audience?
Oh, no,
or is it about the musicians?
Yeah, the musicians, obviously, you would put the musicians first. The process of, with respect to an audience, the process of making the music is something that, you and I can speak, because we're lucky enough to be able to play a musical instrument, and I mean that in that respect. It's good fortune that has allowed you to go through life and me to go through life knowing, because I would be lost without. I don't know what I would do if I didn't play.
Don't know what I'd be doing if I wasn't a drummer. What would I do with my time? What do people do with their time?
I don't understand. I can try cooking a little bit. Yeah, okay, I get off on that, but only to a degree. I could try reading a book. I can't read. You know, but on that idea of taking those covers and being cognizant of what people are doing and being aware of the cliches and the subsets of theory that make up the patterns that we've all got to work towards to allow us to communicate with other musicians, because if you can't do that, you can't communicate. But when there are people who hear of what I'm doing and they know that I'm working on this song or that song or whatever, they'll get back to me and they'll say, oh yeah, but you should listen to their version of the same song. But at that point, that's when I get back to where you were standing. And it's like, look, I'm sorry, I don't want to go into that version of that song right now, because I know the song that I'm covering right now. And I want to cover it, this is kind of like a really interesting twist, I want to cover it in a unique and original way.
Right.
It's like I'm stealing, but do you mind, I want to steal it my way,
make it your
not
own
their
way.
way, you know? Like,
Yeah. One of the issues that I've always had as a drummer, and this has happened, and it's part of being a drummer, and part of the fact that maybe I wasn't as professional as I could have been or should have been, was that when people would say, well, you're playing it wrong. Like, well, because I was very much of the freedom style. Like, well, I took the idea and I made it mine. But then if you're going to be a working drummer, and this is true of any musician, if you're going to be a working drummer, you need to play it as it is written, as it is supposed to be, that the audience expects. And when we were in playing in this polka band, it is a wedding band. We played a lot of covers. We played a lot of traditional Ukrainian music, and the audience, we played weddings, and it was like the drums had to be played a certain way. You couldn't be doing a 32 bar jazz fill. It just, I mean, unless they were like, okay, we're having, the lead singer fell off the stage, cover,
yeah,
okay,
cover, yeah,
go
yeah.
guitar first, and then we go drum solo, okay, everyone find the lead singer sort of thing, and then, it takes the distraction away, but they had to be played a certain way. You couldn't change it at all. And this was always maybe this is why I never became a professional studio drummer, was because I was incapable of doing that. I couldn't sit there and go, okay, well, I have to play 4 on the floor, I have to play the same rock beat, the same way, every single time. I understand how some people can do it, but for me, it was always like, I had to change something every time I was changing it. Which, I mean, even with the early band the rock band I was in, there were the elements that you have to play, that way, the verse, chorus, and then bridge. But the way that I played each one, as long as I kept the measures the same, it was okay. And we went off a lot of energy in that rock band.
That's the difference between, in terms of an arrangement, and being able to improvise during a piece. And I'm thinking about the way you described that. To have a drummer that can mix the beat around, but the arrangements of the song are the same. Let's say you're playing those songs, like every week, for example, or every night or whatever. But if you move the song around from within the song, and the flavor of the drum is changing, that's from a musician's point of view, that's a great thing, because as a bass player or as a guitarist, you're feeding off what the drummer is doing.
Yeah.
And so long as the band is tight, to the point that that great phrase during the 90s was that supergroups became jam bands, that they could just mix and I think Dave Matthews Band was a fine example of that, but there are other bands.
Were they a jam band, really?
I
think of Rush or even Dream Theater.
And I don't necessarily think Dave Matthews Band was that much of a jam band. I've gone back and looked at some of their things, but that's what they were. They were sort of given that kind of kudos. But the difference in what you're describing now, because this, for people that again listening, it was me that was talking before about the frustrations with a guitarist, because the guitarist wasn't able to improvise through changes from one rehearsal to the next rehearsal, and the clear motives that you were, from a band point of view, you needed those motives, those riffs, those licks to be there. One night they were there, the next night they were gone, and that's the difference between the idea of a drummer that might not take on board, as you were saying before, you might not want to do those sorts of things, and that's maybe why you didn't become a session drummer, for example. where you're expected to do that stuff all the time, as opposed to somebody that can still move the song forward, but come up with variations on a theme, as opposed to somebody that couldn't come up with variations on a theme.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of jazz drummers can do that, where they are able to. They do both. I mean, most jazz drummers have to be studio musicians in some respect, in that they have to learn the phrasings. And part of being a jazz drummer, if you ever are at all considered to be a jazz drummer, it's because you know the classics, you know the standards.
Yeah.
Which is something that I didn't fully respect when I was growing up. You know, when I first picked up the sticks. I mean, I got sticks and drum set. I'm like, let's play, let's jam.
Yeah.
But there's a standard library, a standard set of songs. Your dictionary, your musical dictionary. You've got to learn that in order for you to jump off and create whatever it is that comes from
me,
that.
From a guitar point of view, for me, I've always wanted to play in a blues band. I never really had done. I've jammed a lot on blues, and that's how I first learned to play music, was with a buddy that he needed somebody to hold it together so he could jam.
Right.
And you know, this is going a long ways before the internet. This is when you had to play with other people, otherwise there was no way you could really play music. And so he decided that we'd started university together, and we enjoyed smoking dope together, so that's what we were doing and all that kind of stuff, which is what you did in those days. And he knew that I could hold rhythm. It's something he must have worked out relatively quickly. I wanted to play guitar, but I just didn't know what to do. So he would show me what to do in terms of playing 12-bar blues and all this kind of stuff. And just said, listen, you just do that. You hold that together for like 4 minutes, and every 12 bars you're going to do this change. It's going to be the same every 12 bars. Every 4 bars you're going to go from an A to a D, for example,
Right.
and up to the E. And he knew that I could hold that together, and I was digging it. But what he was doing was just sort of jamming away up the top, and it was fantastic. Now, I've always wanted to do that and probably possess the skills to be able to do that, but to this day, and I tried to do this during the COVID thing as well, where I went online, of course, and I started to target blues licks, and that's all it is. If you've got all these blues licks down,
Yeah.
you can do whatever you want to do. I learned a few of them. I thought, yeah, they're really cool. They were variations. They were actually tightening up on my own style of playing guitar, because whatever I did as a lead guitarist, it all kind of came from knowledge of the fretboard, my own feel, and my own take on what other guitarists were doing. But I couldn't do what they were doing. But I would do, my variation on that to get ultimately, I think, my style. But what it precluded my doing was to actually have those really, really, let's say 20 killer blues licks that any other blues bands would go, yeah, this guy can come and play with us because he can drop those licks in just about on every song. I didn't have that. And I kind of still to this day don't really want to do that.
What do you mean you don't want to do that?
I don't want to play those licks
over and over again.
Over and over again because they're the standard licks.
Right.
It's like what I want to do is I'm drawn to them, and I'll listen to a blues guitarist on whatever forum or whatever media that we're listening to, be it live or be it on recorded version or whatever, and I'll go, wow, man, that's so cool. That's so cool. I love it. It's going to tear my heart out like it's going to tear everybody else's heart out.
Right.
But for some reason or other, I think either A, the season has passed by virtue of the fact that I've developed my own style anyway, and that's where I'm parked, or that's where I'm camped. Or I don't know, maybe C, maybe there is an intellectual problem. Maybe I can't get there, an intellectual or a skill problem. Maybe I don't possess the skills to get there. Time will tell on that.
Yeah, I found when I found jazz, I didn't start studying jazz and playing jazz until my early 20s. And even then I still had trouble locking in the pocket, sort of thing, that drum beat. But I found actually it was almost liberating to be able to just play the jazz swing. And now one of the most fun I have sometimes is just sitting on the iPad and playing the ride cymbal beat, the da 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 da.
Oh yeah.
And then just doing that, and I've found that I can. I haven't published these because it's just a ride cymbal, but just playing the cymbals or just the drums and just keeping the rhythm, keeping the beat throughout, keeping that swing, because if you don't have the swing in jazz, then
you forget about it.
Then it's not jazz anymore.
You know what you're talking about? This is something that I was searching for last night. Because let me see. No, yesterday, not last night. It was whilst I was working on. No, it was last night whilst I was working on the song Havana, which which was this piece in 6/8, I didn't necessarily get the hi-hats that I was looking for, and so I went searching in some packs from Native Instruments that I had, where specifically they had tops, drum tops, and all they are is just cymbal work.
Right.
So there's a marketplace for just sitting back and just doing all the top work. So people can get their kicks and snares from their doors and all that kind of stuff from the DAWs quite easily. But a lot of people find it very difficult to program, particularly in terms of programming. They find it incredibly difficult to program hi-hats.
It still is. Yeah, I have trouble because sometimes, especially the electronic, it doesn't trigger as well. But also, even with drums, the way I was trying to replicate some of the stuff I used to play, and the fingering on an iPad is different than the physicality. But once I got that, even still, it wouldn't trigger properly. And so I'd have to I'd go in there, and it was just a pain in the ass. I'm like, this is not worth my time to sit there for 3 hours.
In terms of writing one? No.
To even just try to fix what I had in mind, or what I played 20 years ago.
In terms of quantizing, all that kind of stuff.
Quantizing and then fixing the missed beats because of the technology. Not because of me, necessarily. Me too, but also because
quantizing is like going to a party, and your date, you think she's really hot. Is this going on there? But this is what quantizing is. You go out there and you find at the end, oh man, I'm going out with quantizing. Oh wow. And you get the end of the night, it's not been a great day. And you left searching. You just left, you think, well, so much for that. You drop her off and you go home.
Life has been sucked out of you, but not the way that you wanted it sucked out of you, basically.
Totally. You expected more return for what you were investing than what's coming back.
Yeah.
I've always felt that when I've got to begin to quantize, particularly with hi-hats and stuff like that, when I've got to go down that road, I already know that I'm on the wrong track.
Yeah.
I already know that, you got to find a way that you don't have to do that. Because if you've got to quantize all this stuff, you're taking yourself away from where you really want to be.
Quantize only works if it's going to be a specific beat. Like if you're trying to do a lot of the freestyle, any sort of jam or a free type fill, it takes away from the emotion of it. The push and pull that comes with like a slightly off time, mathematically a slightly off time drum strike. Whereas quantize just makes it all the same.
Totally, yeah. That's absolutely the point. And that's the beauty of having, it gets back to a question you were asking earlier as well about working with other people. No matter what gets done in the studio, the best option for me to this day, even if it's not happening at this particular point in time, the best option is always to find or be with a person who's of the same musical intellectual ability, so that you can communicate an idea and then that can be executed, and it's all in real time. And the only quantizing that might have to take place is a couple of kicks and snares to line up, particularly if you're using particularly if you're using drum stems. You might want to make sure that as you do the drum stems that all the kicks and the snares are right on the beat.
Because if they're not,
well, it's going to be a little bit. You'll have an issue that can. I think I found that within Two Bitsville as well. It was the first time I'd used a live drummer for recordings, and so it was with multi-tracks, and it was the idea of getting, so I quantized that track, but there's still this problem. I couldn't work out where it's coming from. Yeah, you quantized the snare drum, but you didn't quantize the overhead mic or the room mic. So you've got this variation. So it took me a little while to work those sorts of things out, getting into production. I mean, that album took about 7 months, I think, to produce, because there are 8 songs on it, and each song obviously took around about a month to get each song right. So
is that typical, a month-long songwriting process?
Yeah, kind of is. The album that's coming up, like on Friday or next week, is made up of a mixture of singles that were released during the last 2 years. that were just being released because I felt that I needed to do something, but that I didn't have what I considered to be the album of songs. In fact, I do have the album of songs that I want to record, the original songs. But that project started in 2018, and then went into recess during 2019 whilst I was working on other things. And then, of course, had to stop because of the studio being shipped over to Australia. So those songs are in the can, so to speak, and it's this brand new, I think it's 11 songs that I wrote from 2016 to 2018, and they were all at different stages of recording. I can't wait to finish that project because it's like, these are truly original songs. But to offset that, during that period of time, I was also writing these other songs that didn't seem to have an album or a volume, and they were just being put out as singles. But I always knew that I wanted to have them collected as an album, and finally, because there's something about having, it's nice to have singles going out. Okay, see the artwork, you hear the song, yeah, great, what we do. It gives you a little 1 month jolly, because each song takes about 1 month to do, let's say. So every 1 month I'm getting this little, yay, another single's coming out, and this kind of thing. But there's something about having an album out that means that all those songs, and in this case there'll be 15, they're all on one piece, and someone could sit down at one point in time and go, I'm going to listen to this thing. If they did that, then they might get the vibe that I get. Well, they'll get close to getting the vibe that I personally get when I'm actually making the song. Because it's like yourself, when you're producing something, and you get closer and closer and closer to that time where you're going to release it. There's a lot of energy going into that process. And also to the point that you have also within yourself, as the artist, whoever that is, be it you, be it me, be it somebody else, you've gone through a process where you've come to face yourself and accept that what you're doing by your standards is good, and that you want to push it out there to the world. So that's how you want to push it out there in some way.
I think of it more of a get rid of it already. I don't want to do this anymore. I need to stop working on this. My own sanity, get rid of this.
Yeah. You can sort of detract from some of the altruism that I just said. That let's be cold and merciless about this. There are points in time where you think, I can't do this anymore. It's killing me. James Dean from Rebel Without a Cause. You're tearing me apart. Again, that's a pantomime of whimpers and sounds that you've got to make during the process. So.
On your website, there's other things, like getting away from the music, because you talked a lot about your albums. We've talked a lot about your albums.
Yeah.
We've mentioned the T-shirts that you have, but I also saw that you have some voiceover work now, and then also there were audio packs that you're making. Is this something new that you're exploring, or I haven't seen anyone else do this?
Well, the audio packs are something that because of the connection with Ableton and how I was always confronted with people coming up with new ideas, and I was downloading obviously I was looking for a lot of free downloads and that kind of stuff where different musicians had put together. In fact, I opened up one just last night from a guy from New Zealand who was sent over to me through a mutual friend, and where they're just putting down all these different samples that they've made, be it drum beats, so a drum pack, drum kit pack, or be it a guitar packs. Now I've laid down a few guitar packs whereby you can go in there, download the licks, and you could use them in any way you want. You could change the tempo, you could change the key, you could cut them up to use whatever you want. So I've just created, it's a little bit of narcissism on the one point. Hey, listen to my style of playing, blah, blah, blah. But then there's also the non-instrument side of things as well, where I've made some packs for film noir soundtrack stuff, where
right.
I've just gone in to watch old movies, just downloaded off the internet, off YouTube, and I was just going in and downloaded these slabs of soundtrack that I've been able to get from within a particular movie, and then just cut them up and to rearrange them and all that kind of stuff. I've also made sound packs of Teddy Atlas, no surprises there, my favorite boxing analyst, because I just love that guy's voice. So there's all these different, you can download the pack into a sampler, you can hit a key on the piano, and then you've got this particular thing, you've got that thing, which could also be just like a kick drum, snare drum, hi-hat,
yep.
blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I sort of see that as being There's it's part of this idea that it could have pecuniary value for me down the track. It may and it may not. I don't know.
But this goes into the studio that you're building in Tasmania as well. I mean, 'cause
Yeah. The
that is the next step, right?
The studio in Tasmania it's built and is, but the studio itself, the technical equipment, the hardware and the software. The software's online, so I can get that software anywhere that I am. But there still is a lot of stuff on the hard disks that are on the docks at the moment, and all the computers and stuff that are there, and the monitors and the mixing desks and the microphones and the stands, all that kind of stuff. There's 31 guitars in that consignment. There's another 1, 2, 3 here now. And there's another 2 in Brisbane that I'm picking up along the way. Then there's another 2 in Melbourne as well. So whatever.
That's almost 40 guitars.
It's getting close to it. They're not collectors, state-of-the-art guitars, but they have each of them has a story. But yeah, the studio setting up in Tasmania is about being in Tasmania with, touch wood, and fingers crossed, enough internet juice to have the studio working globally. And one of those things that I'll be doing is that it will definitely be doing music production for solo artists that are not dissimilar to what I do as guitarist and singer, but also to composers who might want other sources of music to help their compositions, which could also be solo artists as well. It could be for making soundtracks as well, but utilizing different musicians from all over the world. So with the remote technology that we have available now through, let's say through Cubase that I was talking about before, and VST Connect and VST Performer and VST Producer, these 2 software pieces allow me to link with people all over the world, including yourself here in China or Canada or wherever you move to next if you wanted to do so. So that individual musicians can be recording from their own studios and performing and printing onto my computer. Being that this is definitely for a business venture, so that I'm actually producing music for somebody because they want that music, be it a soundtrack, be it for example, in terms of voiceover, there's a company might want to get a voiceover and get a read with a particular accent that they're looking for, or a particular style of narration. Then I'd be looking towards recording people, again, from all over the world. And I've got, luckily, by virtue of the job that you and I do, or that I used to do, there's a lot of good voices in there, and a couple of those voices are already on my...
Oh, so you've already sampled some?
Yeah. Both sampled, but also have access to using their voices down the track in the future. So that the email would go out, or the message would go out on Messenger saying, listen, this is the project, blah, blah, blah. Can you do it? Have you got your headphones still? Or have you got a certain kind of a microphone or whatever? And the beauty of this is that in some cases, if it's on an iPad, it's better on a computer because the software, the musician or the performer, as opposed to the producer, let's say that I would be the producer in the studio in Tasmania, the performer could be a person as yourself playing drums. That from a drum point of view, there would definitely be a need to have 4 or 5 microphones. From a guitarist point of view, there would be a need to have a sound card to go into a computer.
Right.
From a bass player's point of view, the same as. For a voiceover or trumpeter, they would need to have, or saxophonist, they would need to have a recording mic and a decent set of headphones, and that's all that they need to have. No cost beyond that, because the software is freely downloadable to a PC or a Mac.
So you're looking to more get into music production rather than music creation. Which way is it, or are you going to try to do both?
I'll be doing both. It'll be definitely a project that I'll be looking towards doing my own music and keep my own performance side happening. But I'm looking towards monetizing the whole studio, much more than I was doing in the period of time when I was in China, because in China, it wasn't necessarily possible. And also, contractually, we were bound to be able to do one particular job. So I was pushing it to the max as to what I was getting away with. But then I would have crossed over the line, so to speak. And also time as well, whereas now I'll have...
I think that was the biggest thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, we both know and that we were traveling a lot, and there was a lot of downtime. Well, I started to use that downtime positively, I thought, by virtue of writing, because I was doing a lot of my writing on the road. So,
yeah.
You know.
See, and I couldn't do that. For me, musically, I wasn't able to use use Logic as well, as easy just to get something going.
Yeah.
But for me, instead, I just focused on learning Chinese instead, which I don't know, maybe that'll become the next step of some sort.
Well, no, it's one of the strings. I mean, I've come out of, it's over 20 years in China by the time I leave here. I can function, as I know you can as well, I can function very comfortably in this country now by speaking and listening. I can't read or write, but I can get by and have the most incredible and funny conversations with people.
Yeah, see, my listening is still garbage. It's just, I kind of get what they're saying and I can communicate what I need, but I mean, I can't. But one success I did have this just recently was being able to actually read the newspaper. That's
Brilliant.
something, I sat down and started reading it and I'm going, hey, I actually know what these characters mean. Like, I'm not just recognize them, but I was like, hey, I actually understand what some of them mean. Not all of them. I can't sit there and translate just yet. But
I went through a period of time where I could do that close. I could understand in a paragraph. I could understand maybe the main idea on a good day. But that was around about 2009, 2010 when I was targeting reading and writing.
Right.
But I just let that go. By 2011, 2012, it had stopped.
So
Listening.
Is that my future then?
No, not necessarily, because you've taken me to a board where you've already gotten to a stronger level already. I can tell that from the way you described that. The listening side of things is really kind of cool. I look at upon it as the truly ultimate period of or definition of autism. It's like whatever you're saying, you know, ultimately it doesn't mean shit to me because I want to talk about what I want to talk about. Right. So it's like you control the conversation. It doesn't matter what they say. They've understood your question. They begin to reply to you. You don't understand what's going on, so you turn it. You know what I mean? It's a skill that I've taken it on board to allow people to come away feeling, man, that guy's good at his Chinese and he's trying to communicate with us.
But I wonder how much of them do that to each other, like whether or not they understand a lot of it. And I don't mean that Chinese people don't understand each other, but I mean just in terms of, especially in Beijing, there's so many different people from all walks of life within the Chinese sphere that I wonder if they're at all listening to each other. Like, did you hear what I actually said to you? And I think we do it in English too, as well.
Probably.
Like someone says something like, okay, anyway, so what as I was saying.
Probably, but I think here the propensity for that to happen is greater because of A, the speed, B, the population. Speed relating to people just don't have time. Population, and they're getting back to that idea of time. People are frazzled here. You know, I mean, if one thing, the COVID thing, I did coin last night that the phrase COVID, it's just such a rotten name. It's rotten. I like that word. It's a rotten name for a disease. I've never really liked it. So there was the coronavirus that sort of rang, but I'm defaulting within myself. It's just a game I'm playing. I'm defaulting. I kind of like bat flu. You know, I just.
It's bat flu.
I don't know. I said that's not doing a lot for the bat. You know, for the bat image right now.
No, poor bat. Now,
yeah, poor bat just sitting back in his cage, hanging upside down, waiting for his next dose of blood, and you know, like all of a sudden,
what happens to him? We have been going on quite a long time, but I also want to ask about why China? Why did you come here 20 years ago? You've been here for a long time. What was the impetus? I mean,
remember we said a little earlier, I know that's a good question to ask you because people might, just where the podcast might be
well, especially now with the coronavirus, people are questioning where they are. They might have the chance to jump, and I don't mean off the building, hopefully not if you are, get some help, but like make that change. I mean, so what attracted you to China? What kept you here so long, and what was the setup?
I had in Sydney, which in the day, and we're talking here in the 90s, by the mid-90s, Sydney was becoming very much a popular destination for many people from, particularly from Shanghai and from Guangzhou were moving to Sydney. So there was a rise in Chinese migration to Sydney. And I'd moved to Sydney from Melbourne, where I'd left the whole music background. In Sydney, it was very much a non-musical period of life for me. And I became a Mr. Chips in the world of language education. I'd sort of studied a diploma and stuff like that, and decided that I would teach English, because all I was looking for was, where is my next dollar coming from, looking towards justifying my existence as an individual, knowing that I had a full-time job, that I could support myself. I was in my 30s, struggling to support myself, and thought that I needed to change my life a little bit. So that took place in Sydney, but then it was more broken and false promises. No opportunities of real confirmed work were coming in. It was freelance. It was all on short-term contracts, and I was getting very tired of it. By 1998, I thought, this is not really where I want to be. I wasn't fully enjoying the work that I was doing anyway, and I was traveling all over that city. It's a big city, and working sort of 16, 17-hour days just to make a living. One thing led to another. Along the way, there was inevitably a relationship with a girl from China.
We all have that story, don't we?
Yeah, for sure. And that came out in my case, but it came out inside Australia, rather than actually being in this country that I'd gone to, and found a native girl in this foreign country kind of thing. I actually had this relationship with this Chinese girl in Australia, and it was one that I was. I was kind of happy enough with, but I was frustrated by it as well. I was a lot younger, and I was meeting a lot of different women as well, so I wanted to play that style of life as well. I wasn't committed to just being with one girl, so the relationship was teetering because of that. It ultimately finished. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just know I wanted to get out of it. But by the relationship with that girl, I just sort of discovered that maybe going to China was a way of life in the future. I could learn about myself and find out different things in the country, and go to a place where I'd never been before.
So is China the only other country that you've lived in, or have you been to?
No, I lived in Vietnam for a little while.
A while?
And then I was a small amount of time in Europe, but not a long period of time. You could probably quantify this as being, this was the only other country that I moved to. I was never a great traveller as such, but I've been to a few different countries.
Right.
But I wasn't what I considered to be a great traveller. I certainly didn't do what you did by going to another first world country and working in another first world, like the States or Canada or something like that. Where, don't get me wrong, had always wanted to go to the States. And this year was going to be a year that I was going to go back to the States and travel around and play music. And I think that opportunity has now been...
Be tough now.
It's really tough, yeah. Just as I feel for our American brothers and sisters right now. They're going through a torrid time as a country at multiple levels. So China jumped up. It opened up its arms to me. I had a good position initially with an Australian polytechnic called TAFE. You'd be aware of.
Oh
that.
yeah.
They sent me over here. It was a good job. Terrible conditions. Money was good.
Entry level, right?
Entry level, yeah. And rather than leave China when I decided to quit that job after 2 years, and now 2001, rather than leave the country and just go on back to Australia and just do things back there, or go to another country as well, for some reason or other, I decided to stay on. I think one of the reasons was I'd met another girl by this stage.
That's sometimes usually what happens.
And that was a trigger to a point for staying on. I think back of my life at varying points in times, and one of the main triggers for being at a spot at a point in time has been the female side of the equation. There's a woman or a person of interest in your life, then you tend to gravitate towards that. So I hung on in China, and then I found a job, and it's a job that I stayed in because I thought, well, once I started doing that job, I began to realize that, wait a minute, this job is so comfortable for me to do. And I can develop other things in my life that I wanted to do. And part of those things were becoming, I wanted to return to music. I'd had 7 or 8 years out of music, and I wanted to return to music. I split up with that particular girl that I just mentioned then, which was kind of cool because it allowed me to fully go into that thing. 1 year became 3, became 5, became 10, and the next thing, 2020 came along.
Because there's not too many of your type, 20 years in one country. I mean, that's, I'm thinking of the guy from Aero Factory, the pub down the street. I mean, he's been here since then.
Yeah.
There's a couple of our colleagues been here 15 years is usually the number you hear.
Yeah.
But it's not 20 years. And anyone from late 90s or even early 90s, you don't see them. But that's also probably because they're grown up, they have kids, they're probably even getting onto grandparent level, according to Chinese standards.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
I mean, so like in terms of being an expat, I mean, how was that for so long, being away from your country of birth?
I didn't ever really stop to think about it. It just seemed to be that this is what my life was.
Mm-hmm.
This is how it is. And this is how I wake up every day. I wake up and I look out, and they're the sounds that I hear. That's the food that I see. They're the cities that I see. As you know, I was traveling all the time anyway, at least once a week. And I was enjoying that. So for me, it was like, I knew what it would be like for me to go back to Australia at any one point in time. The only thing I really missed was something that I didn't do a lot of, even when I lived in Australia, but one thing that I'm looking towards doing when I go back to Tasmania. The one thing that I was missing was the beach. But I was never a beach person.
Right.
But, you know, I could body surf with the best of them. I could never really surf as such. And the one thing I'm looking forward to, because the studio that I've built is nearby some of Tasmania's surf beaches. And they're about 8 or 9 kilometres from the house. So the plan is that I'm going to be going and doing some surfing down there. So the one thing that I missed in the elongated time in China, but what I didn't miss was the fact that I was growing older and growing more and more invisible. I did not miss that at all.
In what way?
In the fact that as I became more and more involved in Chinese society, and because I made a decision not to take a long-term relationship after a few years, I decided I wouldn't take a long-term relationship here in China. There was no involvement with any family.
Right.
I had the dreaded parents-in-law scenario. I didn't have that.
Which you hear from some of our friends.
Yeah. It's brutal. It's brutal. It's damning. It's brutal. I mean, there might be some positives, but I don't hear too much said about the positives.
And I wonder, like, what is the positive? And I understand that some of the people that who came here 10, 15 years ago, meeting women back then, or even meeting a woman 5 years ago, would be far different than meeting a woman today, given the current social media climate.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, the next crop of expats, how they're going to function. I don't understand. But this is me 10 years on in my travel life.
Yeah. It's interesting that you're now 10 years. You 10 years here now.
Not China, but I've been bouncing around for 10 years.
Yeah, for 10 years. Yeah. I think that's an interesting point. You get to a certain level of number of years, and you were talking about, you know, how did I balance it with the idea that I wasn't back in my own country. I had long lost this so-called. There was certainly no level. There was no form of nationalism. I didn't harbour any nationalism. I didn't sort of feel that I needed to be back in Australia because of this, that, the other. I didn't harbour any interest in the game. I don't even follow the main sports of that particular country. I used to play the main sports, and I was quite good at the main sports. And had I stayed living there the whole way through, I reckon I'd be like the average Joe. I'd be waiting for my game to come on every week, but I let all of that go, and happily so. I found other things in life to entertain me, and I was like, as the years went by, whatever I needed or whatever I missed from that particular part of the world, I didn't need anymore. I had them all. I had them all here. I built another life here, and I would have stayed on here till the cows would come home.
Right.
I would have stayed on, but it was not possible by the laws of the day. I mean, I didn't qualify for a green card. I got very close, but didn't qualify for a green card, and as a consequence to that, I couldn't have stayed on and just assumed a normal life here. I would always have been under the control of the government by virtue of a visa, and then visas would not be issued to somebody like me who'd gotten too old for work, as they say,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. And beyond which too, I mean, I'd gotten to a stage that I didn't want to work anymore except for working in my own studio, and they would not give me a visa. I've already asked them that. We're very sorry, we're happy that you would like to have your studio here, but we can't offer you a visa.
Which is bizarre because, and this is something that a lot of people who've never lived away from their home country don't get, where it's like when you come here, especially to a country like China, you are here for one job. That's it.
Yeah.
Again, to change jobs, it's not like if I become unemployed today, I can walk down the street and get another job tomorrow, no problem. I can, but legally, you got to go through a visa change process and everything. It's not like in Canada. I mean, I get unemployed today. Technically, I could walk down to the gas station and get a job.
Absolutely. You kind of give up that right. You give up that right. That's a right that an individual has, and the Chinese person has that same right here in their own country of birth. They can lose their job today and go and get another job of sorts,
or work another part-time job with the original job, which we can't do according to law.
According to law. But again, as I was saying, people have been, and I was as well. I was pushing it in terms of what I could get away with. But then again, too, pushing it in what I could get away with, but not charging when I could have been charging, because I stuck to the idea. The principles of the contract was that you can only have one job, so to speak. So there were times that I was producing other people's work where I could have charged a lot of money.
Yeah, and sometimes it's good just to do things pro bono. Be like, all right, just do it for the learning experience as well. Yeah, sure. And I know, like, at a certain point, you're kind of like, no, I don't want to do this pro bono anymore. I need to
but it's a necessary part. And then again, that links into why did I stay here in China for as long as I did. I've always been what I consider to be a slow worker in terms of the artistic side of my life. I'm a slow worker. I work on songs as I'm rehearsing songs. It takes a long time. I will not play a song live as a song that I'm performing live unless I've gone through so many different takes, so many different rehearsals. I take a long time to do things. So the China experience for me has been a lot of pro bono, and this was a great place to do it in because I could get away with it by virtue of having this other job that allowed me sufficient income to buy what was necessary, to effectively buy the things that my future would require, like little things like we're looking at one right now, to make sure I've got enough mic stands, microphone, cables, all that kind of stuff. All the cables that I bought here that are now on the docks, plus some more that are going to be sent back.
But even the computer, to be able to buy a nice computer that you can use for the foreseeable future.
That's right.
5, 6, 10 years, you can make it work, right? I mean,
you're set. You can do that so much easier here. And that's where, all the computers that I own now have all been bought here. There'll probably still be, there'll still be another one that'll go back. Like I'll probably pick up another, don't know whether it's going to be a Mac Mini or a Mac, I've already got 2 of them, but it could be another one because they're going to be very useful in the studio. It could be the latest Mac Mini I might pick up here. I can get a good price on one here, better than I can online or at a Mac store in Australia as well. So I might pick another one up as well or a MacBook Pro. I don't know yet which way I'll go.
So with your time here, and I know I've taken a lot of your time today, but I appreciate you spending the time with me. But what have you seen change, and do you see anything that has majorly changed right now? Because we live in they say interesting times, but you have this life experience that's probably gives you a perspective that a lot of us youngins don't, especially as social media, sort of people who are always there twittering and stuff like that. Is this just something that's going to pass, or is this a fundamental change? I mean, what has changed in China and maybe in Australia?
Australia I can't really comment upon because I just haven't been there. In the last 15 years, I think I've been in Australia 4 times.
Wow.
And the stays were very short. The last 2 times were totally free to be in the studio, to record the drums, get down there, and then get out of there. Because by this stage, obviously, I had my own place and all that kind of stuff, a rented place that I had here. In China, the changes they're massive. It's hard to go back. I mean, when I got here, it was big. It's much bigger than what we're used to in Canada and Australia. It's just huge in terms of not only the space, but also the pure number of people. So the crowds were always here, but it was nowhere near as crowded. It It was nowhere near as crowded
In what way?
In 2002 to 2007. And people talk about Beijing's great change was 2011. The Olympic Games I remember looking forward to the Olympic Games to a degree. I wasn't, I'm not an Olympic
Not a big
Games
sports guy, right?
fan. Yeah, not that way inclined. Love boxing, but take me away from boxing, and it's sort of like, okay, well, whatever. If that's what you enjoy, that's what you enjoy. But leading up to the Olympic Games, everybody knew there was a big event, and it was the first global event that China was going to celebrate. Major event. There were things happening in Guangzhou, but this was a major event that China post 1949 was going to be celebrating, 2008. So it was a major thing to look forward to. There was some adjustment to Beijing as a city, but not a lot. Then the Olympic Games went, and life went on like it was. I'd moved from just slightly out in the suburbs on the east side, down in Tonghui, which is like, not far from downtown, but on the east side. And I moved into the so-called fashionable Sanlitun area and lived right on the strip. And it was kind of fun. So for 3 or 4 years, 2008 to 2012, was a really good, fun time for me. But what I didn't see taking place, because my work was in and around the Sanlitun area and then to an airport. Right. I didn't see anything of the city. What I didn't see taking place was how the city just exploded outside the Fifth Ring Road.
Oh, really?
And when I got hit, Fifth Ring Road wasn't even completed. Wasn't even a ring. It had started but wasn't completed. The fourth had, and the third had already been here for many years. So what I didn't pick up on was how all around the city, outside the Fifth Ring Road, the villages, which I used to love to go to, were now just being knocked down. I didn't see any of this for until around about 2014 or 2015, when I finally had to go out, because you and I or anyone else working with us at that time had to get a medical a long way from downtown, which happened to be outside the Fifth Ring Road. And so for the first time, I actually saw what had been taking place since around about 2011, right, or 2008, realistically speaking. Man, that city had just gone off. Population was through the roof, and now I was beginning to understand, why are the roads full all the time? By 2015, 2016, why are the roads full on Saturday and Sunday?
At odd times too. You're going, what do you people do?
Yeah.
Why are you here? I mean,
well, this is what happens when you double the population from 16 million and you push it to 30 million plus. The official policy says it's 22 million, but the official policy doesn't allow for the fact that anything outside the Fifth Ring Road is now part of the city.
Oh, is that okay?
So, it's pretty safe to assume that if you took the radius of the Fifth Ring Road and then said, okay, for the next 10 kilometers in that direction and that direction and that direction to the Sixth Ring Road, that's all just filled up with people.
But it's not counted in the population.
It's not counted in the population. So that you put 30 million, you double the population, and you're going to get a lot of change, because that just is an intensity of change. So that's been the biggest change, is that change on change has really changed the intensity of the city. The people have changed too, because it's not a dominant Beijing population. It's basically young people. So the population has gotten younger because people are coming from all over the country to make their living. So we're seeing here, I would say what I've noticed is the old world of China, the freedoms of China, they've all gone. It's now because every area you went to was different. That was part of the freedom I'm referring to. Everything now is just a mass, an amorphous blend.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen the city lose its rustic colours of deep maroon and grey to become this sort of a bland plastic. You know what I mean?
Beijing is not colorful. Shanghai would be colorful.
Shanghai's I can't comment on.
Harbin would be colorful.
Yeah, Shanghai in particular. I went to Shanghai in 2016 and thought to myself, the previous time I'd been there was 2007, and then before that in 2001, and I thought to myself, man, the city has kept its character.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel Beijing kept the character that it had when I first came here. When I first came here, it oozed the national capital.
Really?
Yeah.
So in what way did that what was the biggest change in that sense? Because when I tell people that I live in Beijing, I go, Beijing at least retains its sort of Chinese characteristics. That I can go to a shop and not speak English, that I'm going to have to speak some Chinese. Whereas in Shanghai, you can speak English to most people there.
Yeah, true. That's an interesting point. That's a change that, I would say I haven't picked up on, because that hasn't really changed. You can still, as your experience...
But your Chinese is much better than mine. I mean, you're fluent. I mean,
and possibly I don't notice it, so maybe I haven't even tried, at least for 10 years now, I haven't probably tried to walk into a shop and speak English, because I just don't possess, the language. Don't get me wrong, I mean, I'm going to get caught out in the language the whole time. But I think my last major tantrums of not being able to speak Chinese well enough to avoid conflict, they would have happened around about 2007, 2008, when I was working at a job at the airport with a couple of other guys that I was working with in another job, as you might know. And we had a job, we were working as air traffic control emulators for Air China. For Air China. And so I was traveling out to that job a few times a week in a cab, and there were cab drivers trying to rip us off and all this kind of stuff. And so there were some pretty good moments of frustrated use of Chinese language to English. But since those times, I haven't had to go down that road. I mean, if I wanted to say something, I've been able to say it in Chinese. I see what you mean about Beijing retaining those sort of traditional things, but I would say, to offset that, a lot of the hutongs, they've been knocked down.
They're all gone. They're not the real hutongs anymore.
They're not the real hutongs. They're kind of like tourist hutongs that are left with a few token people to live there. The other hutongs have all gone, and they were all here when I came here.
Even in central Beijing, like not CBD, but around the Forbidden City, that whole area, the Hutong district, they're all remade. They're not the old ones as far as I know.
They're all remakes.
Not as much as the Dashilar district, which is south of Tiananmen Square there, where they literally ripped it out and then rebuilt it. But the other ones, they've all been patched up. I mean, it's kind of...
It's just not the same. I mean, I don't want to over-romanticize hutongs, because they're pretty tough places to live. The summer, the smell of urine, you go to sleep with it, you wake up with it, it's there. It's not like where I used to live in Sydney, for example, above an Italian bread coffee shop. You're not waking up to the sweet smell of dough and a fresh coffee. Man, that was alluring. That would drag you out of bed, down the stairs, into the shop, give you the coffee and the bread, send you a croissant, send you back up to bed, and you hadn't even woken up. Here it's the hutongs, and we know what they're like.
Oh, they smell. Well, they can. I mean, they've improved the toilets a lot. They did that sort of modification a few years back, that red bricking, which, I mean, in terms of policies, I kind of understand, because there were so many people coming to Beijing. It just got out of hand.
Sure.
And does anybody, it's like someone came into your house, saying, oh, can I put this chair here? Yeah, okay, no problem. Well, can I put this chair here? Yeah, no problem. Can I have a buddy come in and he'll bring in just a couch? And then all of a sudden you say yes, and next thing you know, they're building outside the window, an extra bed. You're going, nah, guys, I gotta call this. We gotta stop this. This is unsafe.
Well, this is what was happening. This is another one of the changes, and it's been a frustrating change, because as time went by through the 2000s, all these shops of convenience opened up everywhere. It's fantastic. Cafes were everywhere. Street life was alive. That's what I really liked about it. You didn't have to be in Sanlitun to have street life. You could be in any one of the suburbs, and the street life was going on. All those, since I've moved into this particular area where I'm living now, where I've been since 2011 effectively, in fact, I've been going to this one police station for registration now, so for 9 years. All the shops, all the stores, all the restaurants, they've all gone. They've all been knocked down.
Oh,
but
okay.
What it exposed was they'd all been built illegally. They'd all been attached to people who'd given permission initially to do a little bit of a thing, because they might not be there for a long time, but all of a sudden one would become 50, become 100, become 200, So all those shops have gone in the last 3 years. The crackdown inside the last since 2015, so the last 5 years now.
Yeah.
The crackdown has been immense. The change has been one that, as an older Beijinger, I'm struggling to take on board as being, yeah, this is my city. I love being here. It's really doing for me what I want. No, I'd be the other way. I'd be like a lot of old Beijing people are not very happy now because their life and livelihood and way of life is being taken away from them.
Yeah.
You know, the old Beijing way of life of, I mean, even with respects to because I know that this is going on air, the respects to the national leader of the country has even condemned certain Beijing ways of life, mannerisms.
Mm-hmm.
People dancing on the streets or squares.
Yeah, they're still doing it though.
They still do it.
Because they're not supposed to play the music loudly either, but they're still doing it. So there seems to be like that's, and I suspect that's going to be the Olympic push, like coming closer to 2022, where they're going to start kind of go, no, enough of that for now, because for whatever reason.
Yeah, we'll push it down, or we'll push it away. But certain people in Beijing are taking a hard line to that. They're taking offense to that because it's the way of life that's always been. And it's a way of life that when you first come to live in Beijing, you sort of look at it and you go, what the hell is going on here? But you live here long enough, it becomes part of the pulse. It becomes part of the mannerism of the city.
It's like 7:30 p.m. Where are the old people? Where are the grandparents dancing?
That's right. It's the ebb and the flow of any particular place. When the tide don't work the right way, then there's something wrong with, there's the yin and yang of that. It's not quite the same. They're the little things, massive changes. Like we could go on and on about this. Some of the massive changes, just the building of airports, the building of the public transport infrastructure. It's all changing, and of course the ever-present, the rise and rise of the Chinese middle class.
Right.
It's got ramifications that cut right the way through.
It's making my rent more expensive.
Shit,
For some reason, my landlord thinks I'm made of money, even though I haven't been working for 7 months. I go, I don't know how this is happening.
We still suffer that one little thing, the reverse racism kind of thing. Although it's not intense racism, but it's like, yes, we are Western.
And there's a perception. There's a perception that we have money. And
that's right.
And that, I mean, if we don't like it, we can leave. Which they said, if you don't like where you are, you can go back to where you came from. Which, I mean, that's...
Yeah, I'm not sure how I would have handled it had my landlord come on in during this period and said, look, let's go back now. You're supposed to pay every 3 months, where I've been paying every month because, I don't know from 1 month. Next, in my case, am I going to still be here, sort of thing. The other one is that had she decided to slap some increases, increases would have been, well, that's just getting out of hand.
Yeah.
Because, I gave you those figures before about what I got to balance up as to, when have I've got to make this decision as to when is it like, it's backward bending now.
Yeah.
So, and of course, through all of that, you and I have got to suck up this weather right now. So for anyone who's not from China, listen, China has 2 seasons, and both of them are kind of, depending on which part of the world you come from, one of them could be shitty, one of them could be okay, but one of them is just hell. And we're in the, could be hell. We're in that right.
And it's not even bad hell just yet. It gets worse than this.
We've got a long way to go.
It's
got a long way to go.
It's only June right now.
I don't know about you, but the other day it was clearly going to rain. It was about 4, 5, 6 days ago. And all I was doing was just hang out all day. It's going to rain. I would go downstairs and periodically ask, have you heard the weather report? And they'd say, yeah, it's going to rain, it's going to rain. And I'd come back upstairs and go, it's going to rain, it's going to rain, it's going to rain. Come on. Rain come, what?
It was a spit. That was it. And there was nothing. I mean, and then when you look at the map and it's like outside of Beijing city, you're going, well, that didn't work for us here in the city. We're going to have to live with the humidity. I mean, the humidity spikes to like 80% in July and August. And I mean, I now, only in the last couple of weeks, I think my body's going through its seasonal acclimatization to the heat and humidity at night, where it's like I can't sleep well. I don't sleep through the night because I'm just constantly bothered.
I've almost given up. It's just like I'm in the middle through the night. I'm just playing games or watching movies. Right now. I can't sleep myself.
I don't know who sleeps in this weather. I mean, I guess rich people who have air conditioning that doesn't sound like a jet furnace.
Yeah, exactly. But there is this new thing that's on the market. I saw it advertised through the net yesterday, or on the net yesterday. This young kid, apparently, you might have seen this. I'm sure it's been blurbed out now on social media. This young kid has invented this tool that you can have a little box. It'll fit into your room. It's very cheap. It uses practically no electricity, and it cools the room down to like 18 degrees.
I doubt that. I just have skepticism about that.
Look, I'm an old person ready to buy a scam. It's called hope, okay? I'm going there.
Yeah, well, it's certainly something you do need to be able to sleep well, because if you can't sleep, then you're not going to function during the day.
But you just don't. The whole city doesn't function right now.
No.
I defy anybody to say that they're functioning. There's only one positive that we've got out of this thus far from bat flu. I'll go back to the name, and that is that the population is still down here, and the combustion of working life is still down here. Our weather patterns, as you know yourself, we've been able to see blue sky and white puffy clouds. We've never been able to see that in 20 years of being here.
Something's weird. So because the factories are closed, right?
Factories are all closed, and the combustion, the economy is in the tank at the moment.
Yeah.
They're saying.
Yeah, you picked a good time to leave.
Well, yeah. In terms of I'll take these memories of beautiful Beijing.
Yep.
It's like watching The Simpsons every day of the week. This reminds me of Beijing. And I'll be down there in Tasmania. There'll be this sort of grey period, like summer, but it's just grey. And I just want to be back in Beijing. Every day, blue sky. But I'll have forgotten, of course, the intense humidity, the fact that nobody sleeps,
and the smog that can choke the city from time to time.
Which will come back, as soon as everybody comes back, and which has already been back on a few days since summer has kind of started as well.
All right,
we good?
We'll end it there. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
How long did we go?
That's a good couple hours. So where can people find you?
Okay, so people can find me at a couple of different places. One of them is my website, which is still current and will stay current for a period of time. Steve Blaque at Yahoo.
Not the email address.
You can find me there as well, but which is on the website anyway. But www.steveblaque.com, but the studio and where I'm really going to be based is on www.darktrunk.com, DARKTRUNK, and the studio, which is Lagoland Studios, is on that website, and all the things that I'm doing and all the links to the music. And if you wanted to get linked to any music, it would be steveblaque.bandcamp.com, which is where I tend to sell, apart from the other sites like Spotify and stuff. But if you went to Bandcamp, you'd see everything. That's sort of like the home base.
All right, and I'll put the links up on the show notes for people to take a look.
Be really cool, Steve. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Absolutely, it's been an absolute pleasure getting a chance for you and me to, because we know each other anyway, but to actually stop and talk and get a chance to just chill out. And
I think this will be the longest podcast so far.
Well, I hope that the people listening enjoy. And,
I think so.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, actually, there's a few people I have in mind who I'm like, I know who's going to enjoy it, and I know we got into detail quite a bit, but I mean, people will be able to skip forward and stuff like that. So
Sure.
It's not
absolutely.
All right. Cheers.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thank you again. Yeah, great.